Checkity check, check.
Checkity check, check. How we doing now? Did they hear anything of what I just said?
Nice.
No, they didn't hear any of that.
That's okay. It was lame.
It was kind of lame. We just said that Mark tripped over a wire coming in, and that wire was dislodged, and as a result, we were down.
We were lodgeless.
And then we pointed out, this is my wife and this is my baby.
Hello, wife
Are
and
you-
baby.
Oh, what a cute little kid.
He's not a little. He's a ginormous child.
He came in at over 99th percentile in height. I'm kind of
Wow.
proud dad moment. Anyways, they are here because he's just waking up from a nap, and it's more like, why are we here? And the reason why we're here is because the studio's in our library. Now, we along the way have not asked for donations for new Polity because we don't want to sound like televangelists.
Yeah, it is hard to be like, here's our podcast about what to do with your money, and then be like, give us your money.
Yeah, so we're really not saying that. We had a really generous guy buy all of our equipment, the mics, the lights, the cameras, and everything.
Yeah,
But in my 1,200 square foot home, which is now, as you just saw, adjoined to our nursery, it's sometimes a little bit tough. So we have been given an area to build a new studio. The studio is going to take a little bit more funds than we were hoping it would. It's about $6,500. If anybody could help us out with that, we would be really grateful. But anyways, that's the end of our asking for money. Now we're just going to talk about it.
no more pitches.
More pitches.
Yeah. All right. So we are taking questions. So if you got them, shoot them. Alex Wren is here, and he is going to be just shouting them out as they come. We had a few come in early, and I'm just going to read them.
Yeah,
Sound good?
that sounds great.
I'll do my very best. Sorry about the sandwich. I'm just really freaking hungry. I drink too much coffee, and it like suppresses your appetite until it doesn't.
Yep.
And then suddenly it's like, go, go, go. So
One time he didn't go, and it was a bad
I
day.
get angry
It
and
was a bad day,
sad, and I
yeah.
start tearing at my hair. Would a This is Joe from Seattle.
Joe from Seattle.
How you doing, Joe? Would a self-directed 401k/IRA help mitigate the concerns with traditional 401ks? So
Yeah.
we have condemned the 401k resoundingly, just smacked it on its proverbial backside.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently there's something called an IRA. I thought Catholics were not allowed to join the IRA.
Yeah, it's condemned. Next question. No, I think the IRA. So what are some benefits, or why would some people like to have an IRA? Well, it's not necessarily about retirement for them. It's about getting around some taxes, which I think for the most part is something that is at least has been an idea that emerges in the church fathers, that taxes, especially when they're going to a great empire, are to be are not good in and of themselves. There's other reasons we can talk about why the sacred scriptures tell us to pay our tithes, but I think that's a different conversation. But there are other things you can do with a self-directed IRA, and that's like buy your first home and stuff like that. That can be an investment over time. So yes, there's like, and of course within a self-directed IRA, you also have options. You can choose what you are investing in,
Right.
so you're not just investing blind, or you're not forced to, at worst, invest in porn companies or slavery, and at best, or you're just giving to the polar bears of North America or something like that.
Well, like at best, you're just sort of not participating directly in evil within the traditional 401k. You have someone arrange it for you,
Or yourself. Yeah,
Right.
you can do it yourself.
So it's a way. The IRA it's a way for you to choose who you invest in. But presumably, is there still a I know nothing about this. Is there still like a limit on who you can choose? Like which companies? I mean, it's not like can you invest locally through the use of an IRA, or is that I don't know.
So we've tried to talk to some financial advisors about that, and the answers that we keep getting is no, you can't do this. Other people have told me you can, but and there's one evidence of this is Main Street Investing, which is an interesting company where you can use your portfolio to invest in local shops owned by families, which is pretty cool. So I think that is moving towards the right direction. And if your goal is really to kind of avoid paying an obscene amount of taxes, give money to people that you want to give it to, that's along the right track. But there's some other predicaments that we brought up with the 401k, which is that you're not setting yourself up to be magnificent. I mean, that's a huge predicament.
You're still locking your money away for.
Yep.
Is the IRA similar in that it's the majority of your healthy life?
It is the majority of your healthy life. So I think that the real conclusion of a self-directed IRA is that that it's better, no doubt about it. It's still not the cleanest way, the way to really unveil yourself to the divine will. It's harder to get around. You feel like you're still operating within a system. You're still part of the system, and you haven't given yourself to the total freedom that you would otherwise have. And then there is a question about like tax evasion. Like why are you trying to get away from that? I mean, if it's that you don't want your money to go to transgender surgeries or abortions, and you feel like a deep, profound conviction of it, not one of these like that's the line that I use, but one of these deep, profound convictions that this is wrong, then that's something where it makes sense to try and spend the time and mitigate the amount that you can give.
But it does come back to this idea, 401ks, IRAs. I mean, what it comes down to is a question of whether we are investing with a purpose, as opposed to just taking as an assumption that we ought to get returns on, like we ought to have money make money for us. I think this is the part where it's hard, because often I've found in discussing this with folks, their mentality is immediately, and I don't think this is Joe from Seattle's mentality. I'm saying this is a problem that we come into contact with a lot, which is that they hear what we're saying and then they're like, okay, well, how do I make as much money as I was making? Only I do it in such a way where I'm guilt-free.
Yep.
And I think part of the problem is that itself has just never been the church's tradition on investment and the use of money. It's like, if you're investing, it should be because you see your capital, what you have, as being useful for a particular end, specifically for the common good. That's what should motivate us, right? And to seek returns on that basis, sure, because we're a part of that common good. But to simply say, I should be able to make money on money, and this is the way I'm going to do it, that isn't an adequate...
Yeah, so another question from Lexi H. She says, how do we invest in such a way as to foster virtue? Can we do this? Gifting money to local businesses and such is certainly a goal of ours. If we call it investing rather than just a gift, how do we make a return on that in a way that is right and just? So this is, anyways, just to put a question to what you're answering. Yeah. I think this is really important because it does start, it's just a complete paradigm shift. So whenever we're like moving from one point of view to another, we always have like certain hang-ups or axioms really that are just unproven principles that we hold on to because and it's been a habit of ours. We do that, and so it's natural. It's not, it's not a cause for condemnation by any means or stretch of anyone's imagination. It's just natural that we'll.
But we
should
question. Yeah, we should question the premise though that investing itself builds virtue.
Yeah, I think that
because like work builds virtue, doing things, action builds virtue. What is investing? Investing is you invest in a company for the sake of a return, right? That in itself, right, is not what's going to build a particular virtuous habit.
Yeah.
Right. What it can do is it can lead to those actions by putting you into relationships with the people you're investing in, by having you work alongside the people you're investing in, by having you prudentially using the wisdom that your mom and the church grant you, choosing who to invest in that can best serve the common good. Those are the kind of actions surrounding investment, right? Which can actually make us into more virtuous people. But I think that's what you want to say. Mm-hmm. How do I get to those actions? Because if you start by saying, like, how do I invest virtuously? But by virtuous, you simply mean, like, not bad, not evil. Mm-hmm. Then you're not understanding what the virtues are.
Yeah.
We need to be involved with life and with our money in such a way that we are working and acting with our neighbors so as to develop virtue. The actual act of making money through investing isn't necessarily that yet.
Yeah. So God created the world. So
He did.
Great. We agree. He created the world so that we might have relationship with him. Mm-hmm. Like, we are part of creation, and he made us so that we might relate to him. This whole thing, all of this is all about having a great relationship with God and then with one another. Mm-hmm. At the very moment that we what's really important about this is that the terms virtue and vice only describe how that relationship is going. That relationship, if the relationship is going well, then you call that virtue. The relationship is going poorly, you call that vice. Building a relationship, everybody knows this just from dealings with their spouse, their kids, anything. It's a habit. It's something that you like work at. That the relationship that you, work at sounds sometimes demeaning over what it is, but you put real activity behind it. You're striving after the good of relating well to one another.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to mutually indwell with my homies. That's what it's about.
Mutua in Hycio, as St. Thomas said it. He dropped that sick beat.
But it's important what you're saying, because the purpose of our activity in the end is that friendship with each other and with God.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think that we can lose sight of that because we think that the real purpose of the activity is to make money, and then we ask, and how do we make friends along the way, as they say?
Yeah.
But that's not the point. The question is, how do we make money along the way if we make money along the way of making friends?
Yeah. And that's, of course, when Christ says that money is for making friends, use the mammon of make friends with the mammon of iniquity. Yeah. That's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And it's not money your use of money might set the occasion for friendship.
Yes.
But as soon as it's transactionary, where it's transactional. Yeah. Good job.
Transactional-nary.
This is why Mark is the main editor.
That's not true, because I say similarly. I just think that's how the word goes, and I refuse to do otherwise. I've been called out on this before.
And we've both gotten called out on orientate.
Orientate?
Yeah.
Orientate. I think it's just still a word. Yeah. The Orient is the West. The East?
East.
Okay, it is.
Yeah, Oriental studies. Yeah.
I'm so dumb. Ad Orientem confused me. Everyone's... Now that we got the moda propria, we're just facing all sorts of directions. Who knows? I'm trying to make this about things it's not.
Yeah, okay. Bringing it back to virtue, though, in particular, it is the activity of relating well with one another. Why is it that transactions don't allow that? It's because within a regular relationship, you have just constant giving and receiving. Mm-hmm. That's what we call, when we were working at a relationship with our spouse, with our friends, mm-hmm. I don't charge Alice to make dinner. She doesn't charge me to, fix the sink. It's just this constant life of giving. But and that's how gifts operate. When God created the world, he gave a great gift to us. It wasn't like he kept it. That's called a heresy, the heresy of univocity. When God created the world with his own being. Sure, that's something the church has condemned. It was a real gift that he separated from, but was inherent in. And that's how our gifts are with one another, is that they have our special mark on them. They're a way in which we communicate with one another. They're an invitation to a relationship, because through that gift, we start to relate to one mm-hmm. another. Mm-hmm. But as soon as you have this mindset of exchange or transaction, it's I give you this, you give me that, then the relationship's done.
Right.
You've done a tit for tat, and all of a sudden there's no future.
Sure.
Instead of this holy competition for outdoing one another.
Right.
So why is this? So just to kind of summarize this point, investing is in that world of tit for tat still. It is still in exchange. No, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be investing at all, because within this world, in this post-Lapsarian world, this world that we live in after the fall, there are just things that we have to do that we won't have to do in heaven. Yep. It's just, how can we make our exchanges as much infused with love and gift as possible?
Right, and open to those moments. And, and that's where, when we talk about things like investing locally, things like investing in things that you really care about, things that are known, things that are risky, it's not just this sort of arbitrary, extrinsic sort of moral imperatives. It's that those crack open the world of investment, and they open it up to the possibility of friendship.
Yeah.
So how do you invest virtuously? Well, taking that for what I think it means, you have to look for ways in which friendships can be built in and through your investments. A lot of this, I think, involves a turn to real estate instead of a turn to just picking companies, because within real estate, you are almost of necessity, unless you're being really bad, thrust into actual personal relationships and a mutual work with the people you're investing in, especially if you're trying to flip a house or get a property restored, something like that. So that's, I mean, for me, that's what I tend to suggest for people. Not the only way, but I think.
Yep. I think that's great. Okay, Amanda S., she wrote a really nice note.
Thanks, Amanda.
She asked if we could help systematize this for them. She says...
What?
Yeah.
The whole thing? No.
She says, in my experience, and perhaps you can relate, small steps bring about great fruit.
Okay. Sorry.
Now, okay, I think this is important. I think a lot of people are going to relate to this.
Right.
Our financial advisor has said that if we continue on the same trajectory that they currently are, we will only just be fully funded to retire and cover end-of-life expenses.
Yeah, but your financial advisor would say that. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, this is hard. I really wish that I could kind of look Amanda and her husband in the eye for this one, because I have, and we've dealt with this with a number of people, is that financial advisors exist to help keep you in anxiety.
Oh boy.
And if you're a financial advisor out there,
that's definitely the second part of the sentence.
Yeah.
And if you're one of those people,
you might not realize that you're doing that.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that's really important. I think that, within the entire economic narrative that our country is in, we have understandings of right steps and wrong steps. Right steps lead us into some sort of financial tranquility and some sort of peace, and the rest puts us in a very precarious waters. But we need to question, what are the steps that financial advisors often say? What do they assume? And what are their ultimate goals? And I'm not talking about them making money. It's that they want to protect their clients from making wrong steps, from relying on people who could backbite them, from relying on their children that could walk out on them, from relying on their kids who could just take their money and run. They want to make sure that you're doing whatever is normal, the status quo. Send your kids to a good school, to a good college. Make sure that they are, off into the kind of the classic, 50s, 60s doctor, lawyer path as much as possible. And at that point, your kid has succeeded, you have succeeded because your kid has succeeded. And then to be able to, plan to live until you're almost 100 years old, and to die in a very expensive way in either a nursing home or a hospital. So these are some of the questions that we would just say, these are things that you really need to break down with your financial advisor. And if your financial advisor doesn't have a mindset as what Christ is calling us to, then we would recommend just dropping it. That guy's going to be a constant strain on you. And I've seen this, up close for quite a number of people.
Yeah. And you hardly blame people. I mean, no one wants to get sick and die alone. And when we recommend getting rid of blind investments and other questionable ways of wealth accumulation without work, it's not without a mind to the fact that often that is what we're relying on for our end of life situation. And I do think that there's a prudence requires a kind of weaning off the one, and then what's the opposite of weaning? Nursing? Oh boy, let's try a different metaphor. Moving from one to the other incrementally, you know, like I found in talking to these discussions, most people have never spoken to their children about whether they would take them in, and most children have never spoken to their parents about it. And so just a lot of the anxiety that comes from that leads to this dependence on just making sure our money is making more money seems to come from a lack of communication in the first place.
Yeah.
And I've also found that a lot of children really want to ask their parents, but they don't know how, and they're like uncomfortable about the idea of sitting down with their parents and forming like a new vision for the end of their life. Like, how do you want to die? Do you want to die near us? Do you want to live in a nursing home? Do you want us to take care of you? I mean, these are presumably conversations that people have had for thousands of years, that in the last 70 odd, we were just like totally unable. We stutter and we get scared, and you know, because we're all worried about being a burden on each other and such. I'm not at all saying that you have these conversations and then you're good, because your kids might not want to take you in. You know, it might not happen. In which case, I think it is prudent to rely on the socially bad investment practices that we already have been relying on, because I think people should largely not die in the street. But not without having those conversations.
Yeah.
So I think the encouraging step would be to say, like, okay, your financial advisor is looking at the world in a certain way and saying you are only just gonna make it. But then what you need to question him on is, what do you mean by making it? What do I mean by making it? And what do my friends, family, children, neighborhood, community, what do they see as making it? Those are tough conversations to have. I think it starts with your kids, then it moves on to your friends. And then it moves on to actually making plans for mutual care within your friend and family groups. Like, who's going to take care of the widows and orphans? How are we going to collect our money to do that? And in a way, it's a dissatisfying answer, because it really does depend on the answers that you get from those particular conversations. So,
yeah, I'd say just two quick things in it is that the first is baby boomers are all going to be 65 by 2030. And
happy birthday.
And investors are starting to put a serious amount of capital behind nursing homes. Nursing homes have already been on the rise, but it's only increasing in that direction.
More people are dying than being born, I found out today.
Isn't that sad?
In America.
So, but as Mark said, that is new. That the idea of having somebody else take care of your parents is of within this last century. So we have to really be honest with ourselves in looking at that, at those facts of just what. If we're the unusual group, then how can I go back to normal with this? How can I move back? A second thing I'd like to say is that I think Andrew Jones does this really well with his kids. They just had their 9th. Pray for little Henry Augustine. He's doing well. But he just will sometimes around the dinner table say, hey, y'all know that at one point your mom and I are just going to move in with one of y'all, okay? And they all laugh. And then he's like, no, I'm serious. And they're like, yeah, we know. And that just sets the expectation for them. And I think that fits also the pattern of how God calls us to follow him, is that he doesn't really give us an out clause. You know, when he came to Moses, he didn't say, hey, would you like to or not? When Gabriel went to Mary, he didn't say, hey, would you like to or not? There's the expectation of the yes. The yes is essential. It's absolutely necessary. They can't, it just won't work without the yes, the free and full yes. But the expectation, the movement, God makes it easy for us to say yes. I guess that's
because we love each other. I mean, it just comes down to the fact that people are wrong when they think human beings are evil. In fact, we're pretty good. We're fallen, but we're good, and we love each other a lot. And most of the things we do because we love each other. Mm-hmm. And so if you can I think people want to care for others, and I think people want to care for their family. And I realize that we're in a very difficult age in which what might seem like a fundamental impulse has been really attacked for a long time through a lot of different methods. But it doesn't mean that we can't at least give that a good swing. Start talking to our kids, start looking towards those relationships of love and saying, okay, so we have this love here, we have this friendship, we have this familial love. Can we make it the motivation behind care?
Last thing I'll say to this is that we'll try and come up with some steps. We've been trying to do this for a while.
She was asking for steps.
Yeah.
What are we talking about here?
You're just giving more theoretical stuff.
Nursing homes.
Yeah. Because a lot of this is predicated upon her financial advisor not saying that they're going to, or only just be fully funded.
We are ripping on financial advisors.
So, but another thing, we will work on steps. We've been trying to. We just want to make sure that they're most helpful before we do. But what is pithy too? I mean, that's a huge thing for us. It has to be pithy.
Got to have your 12 rules for financial peace.
But another thing is that college, like saving up for your kids' college, is so prohibitive.
Don't do it.
I would say, really do not save your kids' college.
You said save your kids' college, but in a way that's true.
Don't save your kids' college. Yeah,
by saving true, isn't it? For your kids' college.
If they undergraduate is, despite what the mainstream media says, it is higher education. It is something that a child has to actually choose. No, I'm really passionate about engineering, really passionate about chemistry. I'm really passionate about the church fathers. I really want to go on and study. That has to be an absolute passion of theirs for them to go off and do it. Otherwise, there are so many good jobs that they are going to be able to have without a degree. And anyways, most people, once they graduate, go and get a job that they could get one with. Once they have a degree, go and get a job that they could have gotten without it.
Right. And let's be real. I mean, if you're saving for your 4-year-old's college education now, you're guaranteed, college education by the time he's ready for college education is just going to be in your basement chained to a wall with like Zoom teachers. College education is obviously stuttering, faltering, failing. It's producing moronic people. Mm-hmm. Bless them. But the idea, having taught college classes, the idea that this is somehow a life fulfillment of education valued for its own sake is insane. Yeah. So it's going to collapse. The debts are insane. We cannot handle this amount of debt crushing an entire generation of people. Yeah. It's not going to last. Yeah. So either the institutions will fail or the government will bail us all out. I don't know. But it just seems like a tenuous thing to start stockpiling for.
Yeah, I think so too. So hopefully some of that will
showing my hand a little bit.
All right, let's get to some more of it.
There's questions.
Alex is going to.
I thought we were killing time.
Just so you guys know, we're 30 minutes in.
Okay.
3 questions. We have probably 40 waiting.
Holy crap! All right,
wow, we're gonna have to up their game right now. Okay.
Okay.
I'll try and repeat them.
This is a quote. I'm not totally sure what
we're listening.
Is. Here you go.
Okay.
Objection from a friend. If someone is really good at producing a good, he will attract more customers, thereby monopolizing the production of said good. Thus, what becomes available to a group of customers, which group increases over time, is a higher quality of this good. In this way, does specialization not advance the welfare of society? Of course, the producer must remain ethical and would be simply reaping the benefits of his hard work.
Does specialization benefit society?
Sure. Yeah, there's certain specializations that do.
I don't feel like we've critiqued specialization in its own.
I don't think so either. Yep. Next question.
Yes. No, it's true. Specializations are good. What's wrong with I love specialization.
Yeah. If you
I think you're special. I'm special.
But monopolization maybe is part of that question.
So is it being we should have monopolies because the best people will always be the ones who have the monopolies? Come on. No, they're not. Look at all the monopolies.
I think that there's something about scale that is important to all of this. Is that scope and efficiency always work against one another. The better that you can do is always limited by the amount that you can do.
Right, but also let's just be real. Like, you might be the best person or whatever at producing like more cell phones and distributing through the entire world, but that doesn't mean that cell phones are good. Like, we live in an age of mass production where entrepreneurship is like, how do I figure out something people don't need and make 2 billion of them? That's what we do, right? That's how you succeed. So the idea that that system can be equated with like, if we can equate that with the obvious good of like, hey, someone who's really talented should have a certain authority over a certain kind of production. Of course. Yeah, let the good guy do the good thing. But the idea that you can just sort of, make that a conservative talking point and just be like, therefore everything that we have is good, because that's what it becomes. It's like, well, if it must be that the people that are producing, all the crap that we consume constantly are in fact the ones most able to produce the best quality product, right? So it's not that it's wrong, it's just wrong to use it within a kind of like catechetics of capitalism, I think.
Okay, next one. Let's go.
Can you differentiate between the principle of wealth without work and monetary investment and the principle of receiving apples from a tree planted as an investment?
Yeah, great question. Okay, so can you distinguish between wealth without work from getting apples from a tree that you planted or didn't plant? What was it? Either one is a good question. And also investments. Cool, right? Okay, great. That's a great question. So here's
number 1. Apples are from God.
Well, no, that's it. I mean, really, everything we have is a gift.
Yeah.
So we have to realize is that all that we have is wealth without our merit. All this is unmerited. So, okay, great. We live in a theology of gift, a reality of gift, excuse me. We don't live in a reality of exchange. Why do we then use the phrase wealth without work? Well, one, it sounds awesome.
2 W's.
They just flow together. But more specifically, it's
3 W's. I'm sorry. It's 3 W's. I'm sorry. I will stop interrupting.
That was extraordinary.
It's awesome.
But if it's a double U and it's 3 of them, is it 6 U's?
www. Finish the question.
The real distinguishing marker is about the voluntary nature of what is given. Okay, so God, as he created all the wealth that we did without any work, did he do it voluntarily or involuntarily? Did it voluntarily. That was a free gift.
Praise him.
Yep. Now, when we get wealth without work, is that voluntary or involuntary? And this gets down to the question of a compromised or an uncompromised will. So if I am a poor boy who has no hope of feeding himself or housing himself on his own, and I go to the factory and the factory worker says, I'll pay you $1 an hour to work, 20 hours a day, then would you say that I'm then accepting that payment with my full will or a compromised will?
I'd say compromise.
You would say compromise. I would say compromise. Okay. St. Thomas said compromise. And he said compromise for a lot less than that example. But just to make it clear, in the entire medieval tradition was just, this is one of the things that they were totally unanimous about, is like that is always bad. Now, when it comes to a point of investing, then you could say, well, wait a minute. The company has it has taken itself public. That means that they want your money. That means that they're okay to separate. But here's the big difference. St. Thomas gives us a conclusion, and we'll kind of back up into the reason. He says that whenever you have a monetary interaction, it always involves coercion. It always involves a compromised will. Why is that? Because within the exchange, you don't know the other person. You aren't really giving a gift freely and fully, so that your gift is then shared by the person who rejoices in receiving it, and you rejoice in seeing the person receive it. It's not a totally uncompromised will. That's why investing as a whole will not happen in heaven. It's still transactionary.
Sure.
Transactional. Got it. One of these years I'll get it. I'm only writing my dissertation on this stuff. So that's now when we're involved in blind investing, that only heightens the problem. When we're involved in investing only for a return on an investment, that heightens the problem. If, however, we're investing in such a way as saying, I really want to make this company work, but even if it fails and I lose all my money, I'll have said, this was worth a shot.
Mm-hmm.
Our city really needed this. Our friends really would have benefited from this. This would have increased helped the common good and just made everybody happier. That is starting to tend towards gift.
Mm-hmm.
That's starting to tend towards a wealth that doesn't include work in a really beautiful way.
Yeah. And I think just really short on it, usually when I hear the term wealth without work, it means that someone is profiting off of some other person's work. It's just not their own.
Yeah.
And so this is what often happens, that we're gaining wealth without work, not because there's no work happening, right? But because we are not working. There is still work happening when you do, say, a blind investment or something like that. And this is the problem, is the separation of the person from actually working, acting so as to produce a profit and actually being involved in what he invests in. Whereas with like the apples on the tree, there's not like there's somebody who's really working to give me the apples in that instance. It is rather the Father who, I guess, does work even unto today. But yeah.
Okay, I think there's much more to be said, but we have a bazillion questions. So here we go. Next one.
We can do it, man.
Talked about money being proportional to one's station.
Money proportional to one's station.
How does one discover one's station?
Oh, it's tattooed on the bottom of your foot.
So the question is,
sorry.
how do you
determine your station and therefore determine how much money? I mean, because Aquinas says, right, that you can only have as much money as is necessary.
Where is it tattooed?
Where it says Andy, it's right next to Andy. The Aquinas says that you can only have as much money as is necessary to fulfill the duties of your office. But it's a great question because we have no idea what that means now. He's obviously speaking out of the High Middle Ages, in which not only were there actually distinct offices, whether you were a merchant or a guildsman or priest or whatever, peasant, there was a delight, I think, in such things, in the fact that you were born with a particular name and place, and that there was a perfection to be sought within a particular office. Whereas now we're all untethered. We've all been told by Disney that we can do whatever we want, and so we walk out our front doors and just start screaming because it sucks to have to do whatever you want.
Well, and if you can, it does. That's sure true. The only way to ensure that you're shackled for the rest of your life is that you keep all your options open, right?
But that's good. Did you come up with that?
I did. Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah. Well, but there's also a really important side of it too, is that if you always have your options open, then you'll never know how much you'll need.
Yeah, that's right. And then you can accumulate endlessly because you don't know your office. But that's not what you're asking. We're just starting to rip on other ideas. Therefore, I say this: your office can be determined by the souls that are under your care. Okay, this comes from Aquinas' description of law, which is not important. The point is that, however official office sounds when we speak about it from the medieval context, it always amounted to this: that you have power, you have capacity, and that power is being directed towards people that do not have it, that are weak in some way, and that need to be raised up by your power. So you don't necessarily determine your office by saying like, well, what do I want to do? Or what unique skills and talents do I have that I mean, you can say that too. I'm sorry. I'm being unnecessarily negative about that. But my point is, you simply ask yourself this question: who relies on me? Right? If no one relies on you, it means that you haven't yet promised yourself to a real state of life. I mean, I think this is really important, right? Because the church says that we're all supposed to have a vocation, right? And the church, to much controversy, has never said that like being single and living in a certain city and having some friends is somehow your vocation. It's like, no, there has to be a vow that puts you in power over others who need you, right? Whether it's the monastic life, religious life, the priesthood, or the married life.
Yep.
Not to say that you can't fall outside of those due to circumstance, but it is to say that falling outside of it is not to have a vocation.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, the importance of this is that's your primary office, if you will. And then the specified office is who within that, right, is under your care. Who is currently under your care. You need enough money to take care of them so that they can fulfill their offices. Yeah. And this is how the gift sort of multiplies and spreads, because you're not just asking like, okay, I've got, my children and I have a managerial position over this other guy. You're also asking about that other guy. Who does he have? He has a family. Well, then I can't pay him a wage where he can't support his family. Yeah. If he can't fulfill his office, then I'm not fulfilling my office, right? But I also shouldn't have so much money to myself that after taking care of my kids and giving this guy a good wage, I've just got a whole bunch of cash. Yeah. That's too much. Get rid of it. So you either take on more care, a greater care of souls, right? Or you get rid of your money, which should be for the care of other souls. So in some ways, because in some ways there's a sort of universal office to take care of the poor, right? So you can always just give alms and thereby reach an
if you're living fine right now and you get a raise, don't sell your house and buy a bigger one. Don't sell your car and get a nicer one. Just give more alms, unless there's this particular apostolate that
identify the need. And this is why we're never going to be in the end on board with the Dave Ramsey stuff, because I love the guy. I think he has really great advice. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, he's like, and now you get to buy your yacht. Yeah. It's like, oh my gosh.
I already have one.
God, I know. Where am I going to put it?
All right. Next question. All right. I don't actually have a yacht, everybody.
Queen Cohen has a handful that might be better taken offline, but shoot them at you and you can decide if you want.
Okay.
Looked into emptying our 403B. Retirement accounts found it to be impossible shy of employment termination.
Right.
Do you have recommendations or resources?
Okay, first one. I've gotten a lot of questions on this. We can't close our 401k. And if you're out in Australia right now, apparently can't do that ever. It's just not even, like, everybody has to have a super and you have it until you're retired. There's just no way out of it.
Never would have pinned Australia as the great Satan.
And yet now's your opportunity.
I'm not going to do it. So what do you do?
You know what? I think this is just one of these things where we do penance. We pray, we fast. These are things that we should be doing anyway. But if you do not have a way out, and there's no other job that you can easily transition to without disrupting the life of your family, then you have to carry on. Try and change the investments in there. Put it in a money market if you can, or something that and but there's at one point just a real, like, these idols that we create are real and that they really end up controlling.
Yeah, and don't let it stress you out, man. I mean, like, some people are born without legs, some people are born with 401ks. Sometimes you can't do anything about it, so you offer up the suffering for the kingdom. Yeah. And then in heaven, we don't have 401ks. We all have legs. And unless your leg was taken in your martyrdom, and then you bear the sign of your martyrdom, I hear. I don't know. I'm a little shaky on this point. I just see a lot of paintings of saints in heaven with, like, axes hanging out of their heads. Oh, just like, hi.
True. Yeah, St. Thomas More will always have that sword in his head.
You're like, hey, Thomas, holy. Okay. Oh, yes. Thomas.
Or
yes.
Thomas Becket, I meant. Yeah.
I'd love. Yeah. Okay.
Next one.
He also asks, I've struggled hearing a lot of what not to do, but have a hard time understanding what positive Catholic investment looks like.
Yeah.
Okay. We've answered that. Yeah. So just as a quick,
he asked about positive Catholic investments.
Yeah. So when people say we've heard a lot of what not to do and what to do, the really the easiest thing and what we say is that we've just created an infrastructure. We've created, to use the biblical language, these shrines to Baal. What are we supposed to do? Well, just don't do that, really. I mean, the first thing in realizing what we have done is then to stop doing it.
Yeah, and I think we do have a lot of ideas of what to do, but that might come up more naturally. I mean, it always
come visit us in Steubenville and you'll see.
Well, it also just involves, like, talking about how to build alternative ways of dealing with financial problems through having a group of people that can pool their money. Yeah. In many a myriad way, this is the only answer that makes any good sense. But let's move on, because I think that will come up as people ask more specific questions.
Great. He says, I'm thinking in relation to fiat currency, which doesn't hold its value at all over time.
Yeah.
It seems like it almost necessitates lucrative investment.
Fiat currency
Yeah.
seems to necessitate lucrative investment because it doesn't hold its value over time. Lucrative being like gold.
No, I think he means.
Oh, like not like
actually-
lucre, like
Yeah.
like
too etymological there, Mark.
like I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that's a real problem. I think that fiat currency, on the one hand, is a terrible way of holding your money. This is why I don't recommend investing in gold. I recommend putting your savings account in precious metals, and that I think is really important. Precious metals just always have been the currency throughout time. They are, like, constitutionally the official money of the United States. We're just on a hiatus from them ever since 1971, and that historically they have kept their value in relation to food and homes. And so I don't recommend investing in them. I recommend just saving up for what you are saving for in the precious metals in that way. But
then you got to have a treasure chest, which is sick.
And then you get to have a treasure chest. That is so cool. Yeah. I don't have one.
What the heck? What's the point? Gold without a treasure chest?
Now, okay, all that said, I do think that this person is right in saying that fiat currency does drive people away from keeping it. I mean, I talked to a number of my elite friends, and none of them keep USD. None of them at all. And they don't even make exchanges in them.
Yeah, you really opened my eyes to this. The wealthy of the world, their wealth is all investments.
Yeah.
They don't keep any actual like money because they're not that foolish. It's the poor who are foolish.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, poor.
All right. I think that's just dissatisfying. I think this is just one of these where you just feel gross with where our world is at, and I think that's a good enough answer.
Right. Well, and I would say, look, if it's
Maybe.
a big investment that you're trying to make money on to overcome the fact that fiat currency devalues over time, it's not to say that that's unjust.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can do that justly if that's, again, within the whole limits of your office, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But it is to question. It's so tough, right, to question your motivations there.
Yeah,
because you would have to actually work out what's the rate at which it's devaluing, how much should I really be trying to get as a return to solve this particular problem,
Mm-hmm.
and then having the temperance and like the ability to say no more.
Yep.
Because, man, the moment you start talking about this, it just seems like, for myself especially, but for a lot of people I've spoken to, it's just they want a way to just make a ton of money, and then everything else is just a front for that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what we're talking about here. So
yeah.
Would you mind sharing some specifics on where you find these principles being implemented? Serious thoughts, recommendations for those who would entertain the thought of moving geographically.
So the question was, where do we see these principles being implemented geographically? Here, Steubenville, Ohio. And again, like, I say that as if it's like in even here, obviously on a small level. Like, there's so much work to be done, but there is a politically powerful group of people doing that work, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know about elsewhere. I really don't.
Yeah, no, that's my answer as well.
All right. How is the guild system different from a business with shareholders?
How is a guild system different from a business with shareholders? Guilds share tools and have master apprentice relationships, I thought. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's two things that are important in that, is that and this is one of the things that we are going to study and kind of come back.
Yeah, we don't know what guilds are.
Yeah, what are you talking
Ask
about?
Andrew. No, I really don't. I'm not.
I would say that there's two things right off the bat that might help this person start to think along these lines. The first is that master apprentice relationship is really important. You don't find in companies a systematized way of helping raise people up, that they might be your peers and equals in the company. And second of all, it's not so much that you have a share in the company, it's that you have a share in the productive property, the tools that are being used.
Right. Shareholders don't work necessarily.
Yeah, great point. But I think maybe I misunderstood the question, but I think your interpretation of
Well, I
that
mean,
is
business with
right.
shareholders, you're not a guild, as I understand it. All the
Mhm.
people are working together at different levels,
Yep.
but no one is just providing money.
Yep.
You know,
Great.
and taking a reward, because that would be wrong, actually.
Okay, quick note. Some of the comments that were posted before the video vanished, but I remember this one, so I'm going to shoot it at
Okay.
Okay.
you. What do I do with Amazon gift cards,
Oh,
Okay.
yep.
and why is New Polity having an Amazon affiliate?
Okay, so what do we do with Amazon gift cards is one question. And why in the world is New Polity recommending that we buy books from Amazon or having Amazon affiliates? So
To the first question, I mean, you already gave Amazon the money, so just buy whatever you want, right?
yeah,
No, I mean, it's a gift card. Like,
if you don't use the gift card, then you're actually letting Amazon keep their assets.
yeah, like if you already gave them money, at least like,
take it from them.
Yeah.
Take something from them.
or mail it to us.
Yeah, you can feel free to mail it to us. Yeah, we
Now,
appreciate it.
why? I think that it's a sad answer. It's just that it's hard to sell books without using Amazon, because they own even like A-books and
ABE books, if
ABE,
you
yeah.
know what it is. Yeah.
so it's just a matter of them having taken the market and then us trying to market books. Not happy with it. Can you buy directly from us? You can buy directly from us.
Yeah. We try and promote it. We usually give discounts on our stuff, so you don't have to go through Amazon. But yeah, it's just when we talk about once we've created an economic system that is totalizing, you can't just opt out of it.
Well, especially
And
because Amazon has a monopoly now on the valuation of books through
Yeah.
reviews. So it's really
Yeah.
interesting. Like if you're an author now, it used to be like you actually wanted people to read your book and review it in a journal, and now you're just like slavering after your friends and family to put up 5-star reviews for whatever product. Did I tell you? Oh, never mind. It's not important.
Plus, if you're going to buy from Amazon anyway, we get more money through an affiliate link.
Oh, so yeah, two other things. Yeah, and if we put our books up on Amazon, like the one book that we've published, D.C. Schindler's The Politics of the Real, it's phenomenal. It's eye-opening. It's freeing. You should buy it
now on Amazon.
And don't buy it on Amazon. Buy it from us. But usually when you sell books through Amazon, they'll take 55% of the cut. So that also hikes up the price of what people sell on there too, which is an inorganic aspect of the price mechanism. Another thing that is that with the affiliates program, that's just a way that even if you buy books that aren't ours, but you buy them through Amazon anyway, we'll get a small little, like 1% or 2% of the sale.
We might have to have a meeting on that one though, because that just seems like
I think we're
man.
selling out on
For
that one.
1%. Come on, what's
Yeah,
the point? We can
this-
do without that.
It's just where else? I guess we point them right to the publishers. Okay, that's what we'll do.
All right,
That's actually good correction. Thanks. We'll change on
fix
that one. Yeah.
Should Catholics use credit cards, or is that undue participation in a system?
Ooh, should Catholics use credit cards?
All right, we almost did an episode on this one, and then we didn't.
So it's
Now's the time.
It's an interesting question because I say no and Jacob says maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, prudentially no, I say.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I guess we're more in agreement than I hope. Yeah, I think that, again, it's a big old system, you know, and I don't know the full degrees of material cooperation and stuff, and I don't want to know. But generally speaking, I can say that credit cards are a social negative for the world.
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways of evaluating. One is like on your own. Like, am I making good use of this, or am I just racking up more debt? And becoming or being constantly tempted to be a prodigal. And for the obviously
for the brief time I had a credit card, I was extremely tempted to be a prodigal. I was in Austria and I spent all of it on like their beer.
Well, that's at least you spent it well, my friend.
I had a cap on it because that's smart.
Yeah, so I mean that's and for the vast majority of people, it does lead towards prodigality. Otherwise, they wouldn't give you the benefits and rewards for it.
Oh yeah.
And those are actually really good. Like, many credit cards are really enticing, and if you have this restraint, then I almost recommend doing it. But, take from the corporation as much as you can. But for most people, that's, it's too tempting, and that's why they have it. But then there's the other side of what's the company doing with the money. They just shouldn't exist. Gosh,
no, I know they shouldn't. Because this is the thing. The only way credit card companies are profitable is if enough people are falling into debt. That's why they exist. If people didn't fall into debt, it would not be a profitable enterprise.
But is there a problem of paying something with somebody else's money? Like, is credit in itself wrong? Maybe that's part of the question. And of course, no. And you find that actually is, but the way in which the rules for credit are used in medieval merchant penitentials, as I've seen, is that credit should only be given in the cases of charity, and as a result should only be received in those cases as well.
Oh wow, yeah.
And so because the credit is not being given out of charity but out of greed, we should not receive them unless under need, in a real case of need. That's how you're gonna
have to say goodbye to those airplane miles or whatever. I don't know what they're doing these days.
Yeah, too bad.
Also, isn't it just kind of weird? Isn't it weird? Credit cards, I mean, like a company making money off of debt promises you that you can fly in an airplane if you pretend that you have money with their card. And oh, by the way, through this whole system of events, which is insane to begin with, you're going to be given a number, right? And your number is going to determine your social worth and your credit score.
Yeah.
Upon which you'll be evaluated for subsequent purchases, which the number is ridiculous because obviously they can't know whether you have a credit card just because you're trying to get airplane miles, or if you have it because you're a prodigal and can't, or if you have it, because you're in some, like, I don't know. Do you see my point here? That it's just weird.
And
like
it's just
a weird
wrong.
system.
Like, Blaze's godparents just were trying to get a mortgage and they couldn't because they didn't have a credit card. But if you don't have a credit card and you're not in debt, doesn't that mean that you're pretty good with your money?
This is the other thing I don't get. It's like people are like, oh no, I have a credit card because I pay it off every month.
Yeah.
It's like, well, then why do you have a credit card? Besides to build a credit score,
points.
Right?
Or the credit score,
or the airplane
score,
points.
yeah,
So yes, you have to say, I don't know, man. You
But
can't have it all.
Yeah, but within the score, sometimes you just need it, and so in that case, it's like you're stuck in the system.
Yes, they want you to. It's so weird because they want you to have debt to prove that you can get out of new debt.
Yeah.
But if you didn't have
then you're
debt,
paying off your debt, and then
surely
you have a
the
worse
greatest
score.
credit score would be the person who is like, I have no debts. But actually, that's the worst credit score because they need you to owe in order to prove that you can pay. I don't know, man. It just seems like
Okay, we're getting too worked up on this. Next question.
Spooky.
In a situation where you can't work, can you invest in publicly traded good stocks as long as you pray for the company as a means of income?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so if you cannot work, can you invest in publicly traded companies so long as you pray for them? So this question comes out of St. Thomas's kind of 3 criteria for a proper investment, which is that it's risky, you work for it, and that it's for the common good. And so one of the things that he says in the work criterion is that if you are not able to physically work, then you must at least pray for it, which we then quickly come afterwards and say, and thus it has to be a company worth praying for.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain cases where that really does apply. But again, I would say just, you really have to be honest with yourself and see, why are you doing it? I don't know the situation. Are there other people that you could be relying on? Is it a company that you would have invested in otherwise? Like, is it something that you're really dedicated to?
I mean, and maybe
those are some of the ways that you can start to do some, like internal reflection on
examination of conscience.
Examination of conscience.
One thing that might be worth pointing out is that when you are, like, it's not just that you invest in a company and then you pray for them and then you're good. Like, the point is that both your money, your actual money, and then your prayers is orientated towards this tends towards is supposed to be for the success of the company.
Right.
So don't invest in like Google and then pray that Google will become something less than the evil pornographic regime that it is.
Yeah.
That's not the point. The point is not like remedial prayer that lets us still make money. The point is find organizations that you want to pray for their success, even as you want to enable it through your money.
Yeah, that's really important. Okay.
Lastly, so you described some businesses as beautiful. In addition to virtue, what are some important ingredients for a beautiful business?
Beautiful business.
And what are some real-world examples?
What makes a beautiful business, Jacob? I've never called a business beautiful, I would like to say. Well, beauty needs, what is it? Claritas, integritas, and something else. Splendoritas. No, I forget. Some Thomistic thing in my head.
Yeah, I think when I think about a beautiful company, or I'm not sure what I referred to then, or if it was Mark that referred to it. I bet I was the one. I bet I was the one.
It was you.
And the companies that come to mind, like fulfill a profound problem in the world, while also being constructed in such a way that their employees can have beautiful family lives as well. Is that it leads to beauty. Beauty itself is a transcendental that makes truth desirable, that makes the good luminous, so that you can't just say that the truth and good are sterile things, but rather beauty like takes the hand of the true and the good and leads it forward into the place that it's supposed to be. I'm not sure about talking about just elements of the company, but when you can use your ingenuity, your entrepreneurial spirit and to construct a company in such a way as it starts to tackle this wretched economic system that we've created, I'd say that you're starting to do beautiful work.
Yeah, and also just practically speaking, I mean, a business is always a work, right? It's always a mutual work, and it always involves, whether we admit it or not, a place. It always takes up space within the world. So I think that I'm being didactic here, but I think you can know like businesses' works should actually make the places in which they are more beautiful.
Okay.
That's what I think. Next question.
I want to start a family at some point.
Cool.
He's going to start a family. That's so nice.
But I don't think it is possible to raise my future kids right in Canada. The USA is not an option for me either. What countries, communities outside of Canada and the US would be better for raising kids?
Okay, so this guy wants to start a family, and he doesn't want to do so in Canada, and the U.S. isn't an option, so where else can he go? So I get, just on the baseline, I totally get this. I often say that I don't want to play Russian roulette with my kids' souls, and that's why I moved to Steubenville, because I thought that there was the best chance of having, it takes a village to create a saint, and I thought that they would have a better chance of becoming saints here than anywhere else.
He does say that, actually. He's not just says it often.
It's kind of annoying after some time. I don't think you should look at countries. I think you should look at cities.
Sure,
A country is really easy to kind of whitewash, but you're evaluating it based upon statistics, its government, and those are the very ways that a sovereign begins to evaluate his people, which is not fair and it's not just. And if you want to know more about that, you should turn to the next season of New Polity Podcast, where Alex Plato and Andrew Jones will talk about all this. It's I'll give a better plug for that at the end. But I do think that you should be looking at particular cities, because those are going to be the people around which your kids will be raised.
That's fair.
Yeah. But if U.S. is not like an option for you, I really, I don't know.
God's country ain't good enough for you, man. I don't know. I'm just kidding. I don't.
But I bet you can find some beautiful places in Canada. It just takes a serious amount of work.
Australia seems cool.
That. Australia.
I just feel bad for calling him the Great Satan earlier.
Hey, we're planning on going down there.
We are. That's right.
Somebody invite us out to come talk. We're
Christopher
looking
Dawson Society.
Yep.
Is that the name?
Shout out to them. It's gonna be
Anyways.
sweet.
All right. That's not what anyone's here for.
Does the distinction between global and local have any real meaning when most businesses rely on global flows of energy and resources?
Great question. Do the distinctions between global and local have any real distinctions
Real
when
meaning.
the locals rely upon global resources?
No, and it's a bad thing. That's what I say.
Yep. I think there are certain distinctions, but the distinctions are in terms of ownership. So obviously,
No, but this is what
Okay.
this is what makes me so mad.
Tell me.
Well, because like we have
show
this,
the rage as you do it too.
I mean, America
He's not going to.
is a part of a global supply chain, right? We do certain things within the supply chain to produce products that ultimately profit not necessarily America, but all sorts of places. And then Americans, especially on smaller local levels, have the gall to sort of speak of ourselves as this country of like proud, independent small businesses, when the small businesses are just like upcycling things that are produced in China or increasingly in Chinese owned parts of Africa. It's not that I'm mad that this happens. I am mad this happens. But what really frustrates me is this mentality of like the small business is somehow the answer when the small, like if you, I mean, God bless you if you're a sandwich shop, but if what we're doing is just buying from a global food supply chain the ingredients for the sandwich and putting it together, we need to be honest about the complete alienation we have from production.
Yeah.
Like we are extremely alienated and we exist as servants within a service economy that's global. And we should be annoyed by that. Like it should not be okay. We should want to own as much of the means of production as we can, as closely as we can, as most in a manner that's as tied as possible to people we actually know and love, communities. There is no salvation in just like small size for its own sake, and I think that's right on to call that out.
Yep. All right, that's a great question.
But now I'm depressed, so next one better be
well,
happy.
yeah, but I mean, this was a question for us when we were trying to start to form the business model for the brewery.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, well, I guess if we want to be truly distributist, we got to start growing our own hops, growing our own grain.
Right.
And, you know, these are things that we're trying to do really slowly. But again, it's like...
It's a weaning off.
But we have to make real strides in that direction.
Yeah, when I think about our city, I think about like a graph, right? And it has the number of dollars. Actually, it's going to go this way. The number of dollars that are leaving our community and the number of dollars staying in.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me that every politically just and every entrepreneurially creative business decision is going to be one that moves this thing down and this thing up incrementally, right? So every business is taking their money and giving it to China and giving it to national corporations and international corporations. And so that is what needs to change. But it doesn't change through this kind of like libertarian bunker mentality where we say like, okay, we're just going to do it all ourselves, be completely independent. It changes because your actual community becomes involved in the whole work. I mean, with the brewery, it's true. Like we need to grow food. It doesn't mean that we then do all of the parts of production, but it means that those parts of production are tied within a community of love rather than like people we actually know and can visit.
Yeah.
And not just visit, but like are a part of the community that have a shared life of work and prayer. That's hard to do because not everybody's growing hops. In fact, I know of 3 people. Anyways.
Yeah.
Done.
Great
Next.
Is it okay to take out a loan for a house even though the lender will likely have the problem of usury and therefore sinful for them?
Is it okay to take out a loan for a house even though the lender will be committing usury? That's what the lender's doing.
Yeah, this is tough. So during the Middle Ages, the usurers, anybody who was discovered to be a usurer after his death, would ultimately have his bones unburied. Like his Christian burial would be undone. Or if they knew that he was a usurer, he would just kind of be thrown out for the birds. usury was a huge problem for them, but and why was it a problem? Because they were taking advantage of other people. But what did they think about those other people? That they were enabling them as well. So I think this is a real concern. That's something that gets on people's consciences. Yeah, it's really tough. I'm a worse person to ask on this.
Well,
I sympathize a bit too much with that.
Sure. Well, I think that the sin of usury always sort of falls heavily on the head of the usurer, because the poor find themselves in need and they're the only ones offering. So I think we live in a society where that's just been completely maximized, right? Where the only way to get a large sum is through usurers, because we don't have a society of Christian charity. We don't have a society of Christian loaning. And we have increasingly weakened the family unit so that you can expect much less money from people you know, and you can only expect to get money from people you don't know, and they only do what they do through usury. So I don't feel particularly guilty in this regard, because I really do think it is, you could sort of think of it on a smaller scale, that you have a need that is real, and the only person able to meet it is a usurer.
Yeah.
And I do not think, even though you could describe what you're doing as objectively evil, in the sense of you're enabling a usurer to perform a usurious act, I don't think you're morally culpable for it.
Yeah.
I think that's the situation. It's real.
Yeah, the condemnations were in a completely different era, completely different age, where you could rely on love in a different way, and you've actually not sought it out or cultivated those relationships in a way that, and obviously we've done that here too, but it's not to the scale, and it's not in living memory. Also, we do not have a living memory of that type of charity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is a big one. Could you please offer any practical advice to young people on how to live an authentically Christian life in the areas of money, family, work, education, community?
Oh man, that's a big one. What advice do we have for young people to live an authentically Christian life in the areas of work, family, money and community, education and community? Just listen to this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we've tried to do through this podcast series.
Just stop being so lame. That's what I say to young people. Like,
yeah,
come on, you guys, you're so lame, and nothing that you think is that important is actually that important. And the sooner you realize that, the happier you'll. I'm sorry.
Grandpa Mark getting over here. Yeah. I do think there's something true about we're living increasingly boring lives, and that the more radical option movement towards Christ, to be able to live more intimately with Him, is always the right decision.
Yeah. All right, you're a young person. You want some advice? Stop wearing shoes for a year. Become discalced, and then offer that up for the sake of good monetary practice.
Yeah,
if
you're
Christian
in college right now, try sleeping on the floor for a year.
That's true.
Offer that up. Something, the ways that you're going to be prepared to receive money in the future is by orienting yourself towards the life of almsgiving and penance, and self-giving and free receiving as well. So, those are. I don't know how young we're talking, but if you're at a place where you're not really taking care of anybody, then you need to start cultivating real habits in which you are self-giving in really radical ways.
Yeah.
Okay. And then just listen to all the rest of this podcast series and all the practical things we have at the end. Those might be helpful. Okay.
How can a society actually implement any of these ideas without being destroyed?
It can't.
That's the point. Okay. Well, the question was, how can a society create any of these principles without being destroyed?
It can't. It can't. The society is wicked. It's corrupt. How obvious? Like, that must be oh my gosh, I'm getting off my.
Okay.
Society. What is society? It's just us doing the things we're doing. Is our society good? Obviously not. Just pick a thing. It's not good. We live in an age of the greatest wealth accumulation into the fewest hands that the world has ever seen. So the society needs to be destroyed. I mean, John Paul II is very clear about this. The Christian is not simply here to like keep everything rolling along. We are called to destroy structures of sin. And structures of sin are not this airy idea of like bad habits that a nation has, like we're all just, addicted to Mountain Dew, which we are. No, it's about particular institutions. It's these things we're talking about. Like you can't get a house without usury. Mm-hmm. That's a structure that needs to be destroyed. And if you destroy enough of those particular structures, right, where people cannot act otherwise except for promoting and continuing sin and vice, then if enough of those things are destroyed, and you want to call that societal destruction, sure. Yeah. Banks collapsing. Yes, they need to.
Yeah. In other words, when you talk about a society collapsing, and as Mark says, like a society is nothing other than just what we do. Then if we are starting to do something else, then one society will be replaced by another. That's good. But, and I don't know if I've said this, but forgive me if I'm repeating myself. Christ did come to destroy Rome. When everybody's looking at the messianic secret in the Gospels, when Christ tells people like, don't tell people who I am, and then they're going off and they're all saying like, I think he's the Messiah. I think he's the Messiah. Usually what you hear in sermons is that Christ didn't want to give them the wrong idea of why he came. That he didn't come to start an army that will then conquer the oppressors of Rome. He wasn't coming to do, what the Maccabees did But just because he didn't come to form an army doesn't mean that he didn't come to sack Rome. He did come to sack Rome. Why? Because because he came to sack sin. To actually destroy it, in each one of our hearts. And as a result of destroying the sin within us, we are not going to be building up the empires that we're taking advantage of others. So he came to sack Rome through sacking sin.
And the Romans knew this, because when they complained about Christians, they'd complain about general impiety, like, no one's worshiping to the gods anymore, and we're suffering all these calamities as a result. The idea that Christians didn't have a hand in that is foolish. Yes, we absolutely had a hand in breaking the internal structure of paganism, right? Because paganism is a structure that revolves around fear, and it keeps an order together through the calculated use of fear. And Christianity is a system that binds people together in love because they are loved by God. And that distinction should destroy the alternative, and the kingdom of God should destroy the kingdom of Satan. And when it comes to our particular financial practices, I just don't think that Christians should shy away from the fact that we are operating a destructive force when we take up our baptism seriously. That we are not simply here to like keep the world chugging along. I mean, this is how capitalism was preached to me when I was a kid. It was like I'd have these issues. I'd be like, well, but it isn't, are we not supposed to be greedy and such? And what I was told every time is that Christians were actually instrumental in preventing the excesses of capitalism. So by having Christians within the capitalist system, you could be sure that no one ever got too greedy, because their conscience would make sure that they distribute some of their money in charity. And they would say things like, well, that's the church's job is to preach against all of this crony capitalism and this monopolizing and stuff. And obviously it hasn't worked, right? If that's what was supposed to be happening. So apparently Christians either just failed, or we can look at what seems to be much more obvious is that Christians are more powerful than that. We are not supposed to be the moderating influence within a system that's bigger and better than us. We're supposed to be the social order. Christ came to build a kingdom, and it's here among us. He said that. And we get all like worried about whether the world will do all right. Goodness me.
Yeah, no, this is really important. So everything that we have been talking about in this series about money takes place within a larger social order. This is where I'll give the plug for the next series. What Andrew Jones and Alex Plato is going to do in this next series is contextualize everything that we've been saying. They're going to actually give us the language to be able to speak about politics from a Christian perspective. They're going to be able to give us the imagination to be able to see with their mind's eye of what we're supposed to be doing practically, starting from the home and building outwards. But I think perhaps more than anything, is we as laity have a particular task in this world of the family, cultivating the political order, and cultivating our work. Those are the three things that the magisterium has handed on to us. And it's also, intricately related to the three things that religious have to vow against. And this is the reason why I study money, and Mark studies sex, and Andrew studies power, is that these are the things that monks and nuns have to renounce. But that means that they're left for us to cultivate, and to cultivate well in such a way that will enable the monks and the nuns to continue to do what they are doing for us. And so we're moving from money to power. Then we're going to move over to sex. We're not going to call it good sex, though. I've really tried. But that's the order of these of the sequence, and I hope that these short answers that we're giving about the social order are given a longer answer in Andrew.
And I will say, because now I'm feeling guilty about becoming maybe presumptuously angry. Obviously, the Christian, when I say should be ordered towards the destruction of a wicked society, I don't mean to say that he should just step over the bodies in the way, in the sense that we are obligated to mitigate the actual suffering that comes from societal collapse, right? I mean, this is obvious. If the banks collapse, people are going to be hurt, right?
Yeah.
So, but the difference is not letting it be a gun to our head. Like we have to maintain the wicked society, because if we don't, people will hurt. No, what we need to say is the church, us, first and foremost, right, need to be ready to, I mean, it's very similar to like the question of abortion, right? Like we should ban abortion. Absolutely. It's a wicked thing and we shouldn't have it. So we should ban it and never do it again. But it would be completely foolish to then say that there are no social problems that are bringing people to the point of committing an act of abortion. Mm-hmm. Right? Like the moment that you speak in terms of allowing for societal destruction in some way, you have to immediately also speak about being a healing presence to the people that will actually suffer from that societal destruction. So,
all right, a few more questions.
So many more.
So, oh my gosh.
All right, I'll try to. Hopefully, there will be some answered ones, right? Like, because we can't all be unique. All right, here we go.
How can we reproduce a meritocracy or strong incentive for innovation and efficiency in a Christian economy, or should we? That's the second half of the question you just answered.
How should we have a meritocracy within a Christian society?
Yeah. We shouldn't, I think, is really the answer. If we mean meritocracy in the way that we think about it today, I think there's it inevitably comes to a point of where it becomes a tyranny. It becomes a tyranny insofar as we don't realize. Okay, so here's how we think about merit. Today we think about merit in terms of individual human action. That I earn a certain amount and get promoted as a result based upon my own individual actions.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is that human actions are never individual. They're always in relationship to one another. My ability to enact is only based upon the potential that other people have put in me. Okay, that's metaphysical language. How do we make it practical? I only had the chance of going to Oxford because my dad had enough money when I was a child to give me a good education that would set me up to be able to study well and hard enough that would ultimately get me to a good school. No, you might say that, well, that sounds kind of like you're moving in a socialist direction. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that part of our obsession with merit stems from our conviction that we are just acting on our own. The fact of the matter is that I wasn't just acting on my own, and it wasn't just my dad's, funds to send me to a private school when I was a kid. It was also the teachers that were there who were so instrumental in forming my soul, giving me a direction of what I wanted to study, how I wanted to study, and how to study it really well. These were all done in relation with one another. Now, at that point, it's hard to say, you can say that I worked hard and all that, but only to an extent of the context that I was in. Most of the results of what happened to me was because other people enabled it.
And I think it's a very important point, because it's not that there should be think about the church's concept of merit. It's accessed communally, right? So it comes through the church when we speak about merit in its theological context.
Yeah.
And I think that's still true here. It's not that there's no place for a sort of meritocracy, but it's the merit of communities, right? Like, we shouldn't be simply saying like, well, what I want is a society in which someone who is talented as an individual, as a monad, right, is going to be free of the most constraints as possible so that he rises to the top, right? That's basic libertarian ideology. Rather, flip that on its head. If it's the case that the individual is always embedded in community, then what we should want is meritorious communities, right? That actual common goods should be rising to the top. Needs should be fulfilled. Justice should be done. The question is not, will Johnny with his talent make the most money? The question is, will Johnny's town flourish? Will it be easy to be virtuous in Johnny's town, right? And within a Christian sort of turn, it's not saying that those talents and skills shouldn't be fostered, but they're always fostered for the sake of the whole. Yep. And then the society is judged on the basis of the whole, and Johnny is judged on the basis of his part within the whole, of actually contributing to a flourishing common good within that society. So you just have got the merit. The idea of merit has been taken over by individualists who want to oppose it to some kind of socialist distribution model, which I think it's a false dichotomy. Communities merit together, and they are judged on the basis of whether they become kingdoms of heaven.
And there's something that's really important to realize, is that this is true whether you like it or not. So when you look at our fetishization of merit in our modern society, you see what ultimately happened. It was all the rich kids that got into Princeton. It was all the rich kids that got into Yale.
All the rich kids that started the companies. Exactly. And you might say, well, something like, well, like Elon Musk didn't come from much. And he's like, well, he kind of did, actually, Well, yeah, Bezos got like $3 million from his parents to start out.
Yeah,
rags to riches.
But my point is that what we ultimately produce and the success that we have is based in the communities that we are raised in. But then, if we are taking our eye off of that, then the communities themselves will become overly involved in making sure that its members get the merits that our society praises. So it's a systemic problem. That's what I'm trying. It's not incidental to the fetishization of merit that it ends up becoming corrupt, as we've seen it in recent years. But rather that it's just built into the framework of putting something merit above what actually is the real, and that's the community.
The day that our society values individual success on the basis of its contribution to the common good is the day that we can healthily say, aha, we have a meritocracy, equal opportunities to rise, like that sort of thing.
And last thing, if you think that that's going to stunt, that those ideas are going to stunt entrepreneurial ambitions or whatever else, I would say that's just not true at all. The fact that every single leadership book always says you give your people something to strive after, to go for, to achieve, and not like just make a little bit more money, proves that we're really trying to seek after a common good, that motivates us all the more.
Well, but it will probably ruin entrepreneurial ambitions to just produce crap to make money.
Oh, that will be too bad.
Yeah.
Next question.
Thoughts on Knights of Columbus life insurance?
I've got them. I've got thoughts on Knights of Columbus life insurance.
Next question.
Look,
then.
if you're a knight, God bless you. You're doing good work. I miss your swords. I miss your hats. Look,
man, yeah.
I love me some life insurance, but the same principles apply. If you're taking a bunch of money from a bunch of people and investing it in Google and then paying out on, with those returns, you're not living the fullness of what the church is teaching on money. Yep. And sucks to suck in that sense, in that, like, I don't blame anyone. Everyone's doing it. Church is doing it. Pope Francis is doing it. Vatican Bank, we're all in it. We got to get out. We have to get out of Babylon as fast as we can. One of the ways to do that is pretty simple. Stop.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think so. Because what you can do is say, okay, why don't we just have people pay into this? We're the Knights. The Knights of Columbus. Who's the head? Who's the guy?
Carl Anderson.
Really? Still? That's awesome. Carl, listen, it's simple. Do what you're doing. You don't have to change much. Just stop with the investments, okay? Collect people's money, have it as a monthly pay-in, right? And then have a couple people that you employ to distribute it on the basis of death in people's families. Call it a widows and orphans fund, right? So instead of it being this question of how do we make as much money as possible out of American companies and then redistribute, you just play the time game. If we have several thousand members all paying, $15 a month, then we have this piece of pie, right? Then, or this pie, sorry, the pieces come later. Then when there's a death in the family, the same way a health share cooperative would submit its medical bills, you submit news of the tragic death, and then those shares that people are giving every month go to that family for that until the total cost, the total amount that you want from this plan, from it's not insurance anymore, but from the life insurance plan is paid by those people directly. Unless we all die at once, this will work.
Well, and then you won't need it if you did. Anyways, that's great.
To live out these rules, you need a good community. How many people believe and live this out in Steubenville? It's hard to find people.
He said, for this to work, you need a community. How many people believe this in Steubenville? It's we're all learning. I think I would say between 40 and 50 kind of strong believers that I know of.
Yeah,
that are really
strong. Yeah.
But I think there's also always concentric circles of participation. I do not presume that I am in the center of these concentric circles.
I believe that he's in the center of these concentric circles.
But the point being,
Alex, would you agree with that? Yeah, it's kind of fair enough.
But
works everywhere.
The point being that there's degrees of participation, right? You might have someone who's pretty convinced that we shouldn't be greedy or doing blind investments, but they might, I don't know. They might think other things that are wrong.
Yeah, I think there's something where, so Steubenville's about 15,000 people. We're broken up into a third who are kind of classic townies, a third that is somehow related to the university. Even though I'm not at all related to the university, a lot of my friends are. And so
and
I would kind of get tossed.
Catholic, they assume you are.
And if you're, well, that's true. There's plenty of townies that aren't.
Yeah, no, totally.
And then about a third is people in HUD housing. And so that's the way that we're all kind of divided up. In the third that's of the hospital, university, kind of quasi-towny group, I'd say that it's just a lot of what we're talking about is so much in the air that it's not hard to have these conversations with really good people, even if they are not, if they don't have the principles in mind right away. I'd also say that just because we've been defeated and we are such a poor town, it's like greed is clearly not the thing that most people are chasing after or know that they can. They're just kind of realistic about that.
Yeah, there's petty stuff.
There obviously is, but nothing like what I've seen in major cities. Like it doesn't even come close. So I think that helps when you have a community that at least is more in touch with common sense, I suppose.
Right. But to your question, how to start a community, I mean, obviously there's something perverse about that, right? Because the point is we are a community. It's not something that can be done extrinsically just by picking teams with captains or something. But go where there already is some. I think the parish is the most obvious way. I think there's a natural way to transition social events into, larger commitments. So maybe you're doing daily mass, maybe you're doing a rosary circle, maybe you're doing, I don't know, maybe you're just hanging out for beers, whatever. I'm not saying ruin those moments. I'm just saying take note of those people and then say, hey, what if we, pooled our resources and went in on flipping a property together instead of, say, these investments that we're involved in. Mm-hmm. Hey, would you take care of me if I got really sick? Mm-hmm. I need to know. Hey, the thing is people want community and then they want to afflict that community with all their needs. But the point is that community already involves being mutually afflicted by each other's needs. So it's not a question of like, how do I build up my community so that I can, live more justly financially. It's like, just start trying to do that with people now. And I do think that it will grow as people become more convinced on the one hand, and as society continues to become crap on the other hand.
Okay, cool.
Could you guys provide some insight on MLM companies?
Nope.
What?
I love Usborne books and have considered selling them, but I don't
Oh,
know.
MLMs.
How to build a team and make money from them.
Yeah, you can't do MLMs. Sorry, this is a question about MLMs.
Go for it.
Multi-level marketing schemes. So I said schemes. I kind of tipped my hand. I think I feel too strongly. How do I put it? If the business model is getting other people in debt, then I don't think it's good. So I can't speak for every MLM. I guess there's probably different structures, but as I understand it, you convince other people to buy a bunch of product that then they have to sell. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like what people at the top of those are doing are motivating the fear of loss and the feeling of debt in people to sell a product that is not getting enough marketing power by the perceived value that it has in itself, right? You're kind of commissioning disciples, but not through love of the product itself as much as what might start as love, but becomes fear as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say something more generally because I have more of an informed thing to say about the structure itself. But it is one of these things that's so sad that everybody seems to be a salesman today, and that means that they're not actively a craftsman creating things. And so if you're, again, looking for something to invest in or how it's money, I would recommend doing what John Paul II said, and that's cultivating your soul to have real skills. You might say, well, selling is a real skill. And it's like, yeah, but I mean of production, of creation. And so anyways, I don't have anything more.
You know what else I think?
What's that?
I just think that, right. So my, sorry, I'm not trying to call anyone out here. I have an open heart.
But Joe.
But where to start? I think it's simony. So simony is the selling of holy things.
Yeah.
Right. And I think what we're really doing is selling our friendships within MLMs, because the whole principle here is that you utilize, which is only possible through a world of social media, you utilize the friendships you already have to make continued sales. So these become little sources of profit. And any woman, and I mean this because men are not afflicted by this to the same degree, but any woman that has had the misfortune of being on social media knows the experience of having a friend from 10 years ago reach out with something like, "Hi, I haven't heard from you in so long. I miss hanging out. By the way, I have a workout group that if you just give me $10 a month," and then they're selling the friendship or what's left of it. That is using something good and holy for the sake of profit, and it's profit that pushes right up to the top, right? Which is why most of the actual owners of MLMs are men, whereas most of the people who are selling for them are women. I mean, this is just okay, I'm done.
Yeah, we won't get that anywhere
Don't
else.
do
MLM is simony.
I want our kids to be priests and nuns and not have to worry about us when choosing their vocation.
Okay, great question. I think, so the question is, I want our kids to become priests and nuns and not have to worry about us when choosing their vocation. So this comes into the conversation of retirement, that we should be taken care of by those whom we once took care of. And we've said, sometimes there are exceptions to this. Like, what happens if you don't have any kids? What happens if your kids run off to the monastery or the convent? And this is one such example. So I said this to Andrew Jones earlier last week sometime, and he said something really interesting. He brought up the family of Saint Therese of Lisieux, and her parents ended up having all of the kids become religious. Not one accepted. But the last one had to wait to enter the convent before, in order to take care of the parents. and had to wait to enter until they actually died. So she was the one tasked with caring for the parents until that point. And I think there's something profoundly wise. The parents were saints themselves. I think that's needs to be said. They've been canonized, and there's something really beautiful about that, where there is the fulfillment of the child's apostolate within that act, and that there is something deserved is not quite the right word, but something that is deserved of the parent. No, there is also I think still probably hampering in this. Maybe not. Maybe this is unfair, but the shame of being taken care of, that I think we all need to get over, even down to that last little crumb, where it is good for our souls to be taken care of, preparing our hearts in humility to see Christ at the end of our life, and that the delay for the child to go into the convent will be a blessing to her, or for the son to delay going into the monastery or into the priesthood. It will be a blessing to him. It will be one of the richest gifts that you could give him.
Right, and if you're providing holy virgins for the church, then God he's going to reward that. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean like extrinsically. I mean like in actually bringing up virtuous children that want that, they are going to be free, happy, and creative enough to figure out how you're not going to starve. And I think you should trust in the way of virtue to lead to prudent, intelligent, brilliant, and totally unpredictable people, because that's what it does.
Yeah.
Can you give any advice on how a Christian ought to discern a place of employment with a view to the importance of the company being orientated towards the common good instead of motivated by profit?
Yeah, so the question was, how should a Christian pick employment in regards to all this? It's very similar to the point that we bring it up again and again, that this world is a wicked one right now. Doesn't have to be, but it is. And there's not a lot of job opportunities, at least around here, that don't involve creating profit for people that aren't working. I mean, that's just how American labor is looking right now. Is you pick a service industry job that makes as little money as possible, so that as much money as possible will be moved into the hands of the wealthy. And you have to, I think, very often. Now, if you find yourself with the freedom to choose, if you find yourself with the ability to not just take whatever job you can, which I think maybe more people are in than I appreciate, then it's just a matter of doing the research on the companies and or the particular, whatever the business is, and seeing how well they live up to this. One of the big markers is, look, if you can work for an employee-owned organization, or at least one that has robust profit sharing, not just like silly profit sharing that's really just a sort of lame bonus scheme, then you're probably on the right track. If you can work for Catholics, great, work for Catholics. But make sure they're actually being Catholic in their business practice.
Yeah, I think we shouldn't underestimate prayer again in this. We have a good friend who, for various reasons, had to, didn't have a job anymore and started to work for Amazon, and I, like, every day I would get messages or calls from him just reporting the facts about how evil this company was, not just down at the base level of the factory, but like at the decisions that they were making. Like, it pained him, and he was praying for a way out. And I suspect from this guy that he was fasting over it too, and sure enough, God provided a different job, and one that is, definitely does not have profit as its end in this company, but it's good work. It's no work. It's interesting work, and I think that was a real miraculous answer to the prayer, and in all of this, again, we should be down on our knees. So,
next question.
This is the same person following.
Same person, different question.
Can a Christian properly grow in virtue if their job is one that they are not passionate about?
Can a
and does not
Christian
serve the common good?
Can a Christian properly grow in virtue if it's a job they're not passionate about and does not serve the common good? Yes, obviously.
Yep,
Absolutely.
definitely.
You can
Yeah.
do it. Suffering, man, and it's more efficacious than everything working out.
If a just wage is determined by one's obligations of one's vocation rather than by one's economic productivity, is it just to ask an employer for more than your essential needs?
If you have a robust understanding of...
So the question was that if
right.
you're... actually, can you repeat that the first half of that?
If a just wage is determined by obligations of one's vocation rather than by one's economic productivity.
So if of just wage is determined on the obligations of one's vocation rather than on the economic needs of the company or productivity in the company, then is it okay to receive more than what you do need from the employer?
And I would say no, it's not. You can't do that. You need, in terms of wage, you can only, I mean, the principle holds clear. You should only be making as much money as is proper to the fulfillment of your office. Now, if you have some definite thing, some definite care of souls that you feel called to, and not just like vaguely feel called to, but like actually want to expand and you need more money in order to do that, then of course that's just. But what we constantly have to go against is the idea that you can just say yes to more money outside of the needs of your office, as if it itself was a good to be stored away for some future, against some future evil.
Yep. And if you do find yourself in the unfortunate situation of having more money than you need, that's the time when you really have to go back to the virtues seriously, spend time praying through them, praying for them, and then asking people what they need and start buying it for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that the whole wage system is largely evil. And if we're if we're in a society where we're just seeking after raises, what it means is we're not involved in mutual work, and we're certainly not sharing in profits along with the rest of our fellow laborers and those who have provided capital. So, yeah. Which is just to say that if you're in a situation where you can ask, hey, instead of a raise, can I have a share in the profits? You're going to help those people be more just, whoever has that power and authority. I'm realizing this is very like utopian in some ways because of how closed and bureaucratic most large corporations are.
No.
They'll say no, but you should at least give it a shot.
Yeah. Get people thinking.
What about interest on productive property, especially given that low interest rates have been a sword for companies like Walmart, Amazon to drive out mom and pops through cheap debt?
One more time. What about interest on productive property? What was it?
Especially given that low interest rates have been a sword for companies like Walmart, Amazon to drive out mom and pops through cheap debt.
Right. Okay. So I guess I'm misunderstanding the context of this, but can you gain money back from a productive loan? And the answer is yes, historically, but of course it takes work, as we've mentioned, in the company. I mean, the ideal form of investment is one in which you are actively engaged in ensuring that it survives, not only through counsel and management, which are real things, but design as well. So, I'm not sure I am understanding the connection to Walmart. I mean, it's a good point. Are you getting that?
No, I do not understand most of
All right,
these
we
things.
apologize if we've misunderstood something, but I think we should go to the next question.
Yeah, we can email you.
Yeah.
It seems like you guys should like inflation for the same reason economists do. It encourages people to spend their money rather than hoard it.
It seems like we should like inflation, says the beginning of the question, for the same reason that economists do, that otherwise people will keep it and hoard it. For that reason, yes, we like inflation, but you have exhausted the reasons why we like inflation. I think that it really doesn't get around the problem. See, the predicament with technocratic policies is that people are smarter than the policy makers by and large. They're more creative and they have more time than policy creators. If you try and throw something like a wrench in the spokes, they're going to be able to change the tire before you even realize what happened. That's the point that Mark and I brought up earlier with the elites never holding any of the anything in fiat currency, and instead exchange with other financial instruments. Now, so there's a predicament that ends up, but not everybody realizes that, and so inequality begins to expand at an exponential rate, as we've seen it done since 1971 and then beyond, and even before, was as we're moving closer and closer to a completely divested dollar, as it were. But the other thing is that we don't just want people to have money leave their hands. We don't like this consumerist economy. I hope that's kind of clear at this point. Is that we don't want just money being spent. Prodigality is a problem, and it's one that has a particular signature on our age. So we don't recommend an inflationary currency as a result.
Yeah, like if you shop more because you get a bunch of money, you're probably not actually virtuous. Like if you're so at the tether of the economic state where it's like, hey, we need to boost the economy, let's do this, and everyone will buy luxury items. It's like, okay, well that's not Christian.
Yeah,
that's pagan.
Yeah, that's right, and it shows that you're controlled. I think that's an important part. Yeah.
Next question.
Continuation
of that question.
As fiat currency isn't going away anytime soon, what does a just monetary policy look like?
Just monetary policy look like? I don't know what a monetary policy is, much less what it looks like.
Okay, now that fiat currency isn't going away anytime soon, what does a just monetary policy look like? Well, so forgive me for this, but one reason why we do prefer talking about the virtues and what we can do practically locally in our lives is that it is indeed practical. I think most of the Christians that are spending their time looking for policy reforms and for large-scale changes to our society and to the systems I think those are largely kind of fairy tale questions, and they're fun to ask. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't think they're actually practical. I think public policy, by and large, is are fun games to play, but they rarely ever come about, and certainly not in our lives. Like we're never going to advise people on policy, really. So and there's plenty of pushback on that, like, and rightfully so. But those are just some of the biases that I do have, and I think I could justify it at greater length. Anyways, but it also will inform how I answer it, because if I get they decide on what new policy we have, then I'm going to go right back to gold, and to the precious metals. I recently wrote an article on Bitcoin and pointed out its regressive distribution, that most Bitcoins are held in the hands of so many, or so few. I mean, and to the point where Pareto's 80-20 distribution is just blown out of the water. We're looking at like 95.5% distribution, whereas with gold, the majority of it is held in the hands of many rather than few. So we already go back to a closer distribution system. So they're still very far from what needs to be, and that'd just be like one step along the way.
While it would be ideal to pass on productive property to your children, what if your productive property is mainly intellectual, e.g. code, patents, etc.? Does keeping royalties in the family violate the principle of wealth without work?
Oh, cool question. Okay, so the question is, if passing along productive property to your children is good, then how do you do that if the productive property that you have are skills? Which is, of course, something JP2 talks about. And so how do you hand those over to your kids? And he mentions patents as well. It's like handing those on. Is that kosher? Is that good? What do you think about that? I haven't thought that much about.
I think
about
it's fine.
patents.
That's
Yeah.
fine. Do it. I mean,
Yeah.
like in this, think about it in terms of land. Like, it's not, if you work really hard to make a land very productive so that without much labor, it gives forth its fruits because of how much you put into it. It's no curse to give it to your children, as if they now, because they enjoy it with such ease, are somehow, like they should be working in other regards. But again, the wealth without work is insofar as what you're doing is causing someone else to work and you're denying the fact. I mean, this is how I understand it, right? So I think that in something like intellectual property, if you write a book and it's just killing it out there, like Schindler's best-selling Politics of the Real, and you pass on the royalties to your eldest son or whatever, then I think that's great. I do think though that if you are in the position of receiving royalties from what we call intellectual property, that there does press upon you an obligation to become involved in that work, its preservation, a clarification of its meaning. I mean, you see this with the Tolkien estate in a really big way. Like, obviously, the Tolkien estate, it's an estate. It thrives upon the royalties, I suppose, of Tolkien's work. But it's also meant that it has been the life of Christopher, rest in peace, Tolkien, to preserve, edit, clarify, and protect it with limited success. So, I don't know. That's what I think about that.
Yeah.
Why should a just wage be only determined by workers' vocation? Surely one making a better good should be compensated better.
Why should a just wage be determined just upon somebody's, occupation, I think, is in what they're producing, and shouldn't somebody that's a better craftsman make a better wage than somebody who's a worse craftsman? And I would say yes, of course, that makes perfect sense. The point is that justice, the principle that we're using here is that justice is what each person deserves. That is something that does occur person to person, and you can't have a kind of a blank slate systematic understanding of who deserves what without actually knowing them and their production. That's commutative justice, which is a good starting point, but it's not where it should end.
Yeah, and I think the question seems orientated. Seems to get toward the idea that, when you talk about the just wage, it's considering people in their fullness, and that whatever they're doing, insofar as you're giving them a wage, you are seeing them as the way in which you are producing a profit. They are a part of the whole. Without them, there is no profit. So a wage in itself is insufficient, but insofar as you are paying a wage, at the very least, you must provide for that person in their being. That is to say, for their health, for the roof over their heads, for their family, and for their spiritual life as brothers in Christ. That is due to the person. And insofar as you are using their bodies and souls to produce a profit, then you are obligated to recompense them in the life of their body and soul, which includes their family. Now, that is a given for all of us because we are all in that situation of having vocations, tending towards having families, needing shelter. So that's why there can be a just wage that's spoken of as belonging to all of us, right? Like everyone should have enough to support these needs of the human family. But that does not mean that you cannot reward, like it's not as if because of that you can't reward someone that is working harder or is producing more of the profits or contributing more to the total profit with an increase in a wage. That's just not the case.
How would you explain that the increase in material wealth in the modern world is connected to a decrease in virtue? Medical technology is thrown at me when I argue with non-Catholic friends.
How would we explain that an increase in material wealth is connected with a decrease in virtue? And then medical technology being the kind of shining exemplar of an increase in material wealth. I presume that's why he's saying that's thrown at him.
Also increasing in virtue.
Sometimes.
Yeah, I would really question that. I mean, certainly you find huge medical advancements, but along with it, you find two things that I just point out is that we are, when you have the second greatest cause of death in America is obesity or diabetes, which I guess they are different. Forgive me for putting them together, but obesity being one of the major problems that we're stricken with in our society. I don't think it's fair enough to say that we've really gotten around the vicious consumerist mentalities that really allows for the medical industry to flourish. Now, if you're just talking about medical products themselves, what about big pharma? I mean, it is. I'm gonna say too much on this one, but I really think that what we found in over the last couple of years is big pharma showing their hand, and making and really forcing people to do things in order to get them to make more money. And sometimes these things start off well, like, yep, I just went there.
What kind of things are they forcing people to do?
I think like in Oxford, when we had lockdowns, a city of 150,000 people, and there was 15 people that were sick, and yet we're still, and that everybody in the city and everybody in the university was prompted to get 2 tests a week. Buy your masks, all this stuff. I think that is like what St. Thomas talks about, is that the way of trickery is opened up if accumulation.
And you just don't understand the common good enough.
But that's an understanding of common good that's predicative and not causal.
No,
so
you do understand, actually.
And so I think these are just things that we need to question. But there's no doubt that our medical technology is so much better as a result of what has come about. I just
I don't know. I don't know the genealogy of the development of medical technology, but if the idea is that because we became more vicious in other ways, that we were able to accumulate enough to ourselves in order to develop those self-same medical technologies, I'd simply ask whether we couldn't have accumulated in other ways. It's not the case, contrary to the popular narrative, that the rise in science and technological development is causally related to the amassment of capital into the hands of very few people. I mean, merely pointing to like government-sponsored innovations and projects puts the lie to that idea. Now, obviously, once you do have a society oriented towards the amassment of capital, it's true that as it operates and develops new technologies, some of those will be very good, and that's great, and we should always be happy when a bad social situation does produce things that can be used and are often used for the good. But I just don't think we should kid ourselves about our society as a whole. I mean, we produce so much that we don't need, and we produce so much garbage, and so much of what turns a profit is not the things you can point to that could have been achieved in other ways. But I think I think obviously it's true that having a vice, maybe I'll put it this way. In the Bible all the time, there's this tension in which, especially within the Old Testament, it talks about the accumulations of the wicked, and it says that you accumulate, but you accumulate for the poor. And at first it's very confusing because the whole point of the reason they're being condemned as being wicked is because they're not giving it to the poor. Mm-hmm. But the point, especially of the Hebrew prophets, is that you're amassing property, wealth, but the day of the Lord is coming, the day of destruction is coming, at which point that stronghold, that centralization of power, of money, of land, whatever, usually it was land for these guys, but it will be essentially available to being totally distributed upon your death, because if you build everything up into the hands of very few, right, upon their destruction, that becomes accessible, as it were, to the many. And so there's this idea that there's a peace that the Christian can have in letting the wicked accumulate, knowing that according to God's design, that accumulation, that buildup, is going to be for his church.
Yeah.
We don't know how exactly, and it's always going to involve some kind of day of wrath, right, in which those strongholds are destroyed. But I see something like this within our contemporary society, is that the greedy drive to amass has enabled, and sometimes by necessity has produced good things, because how else do you sell things besides them being good in some way? Even if you're really focusing on very limited goods.
I'll just toss in one other thing, is that whatever we create does reform the way that we think. Now, when it comes to a medical industry that is so powerful and often so good, what have we seen also is that this increase in ignoring fear of death, but also ignoring death, I think goes hand in hand with it, instead of preparing for death, which is the most important thing that we can do, you know? And so I would just also question that, even though there are some things that have been produced that are extraordinary, miraculous, so good, it's also important to recognize that how are they ultimately orienting us in that relation with God and with neighbor. So.
What are the implications of not having / missing your vocation?
What are the implications of not having or missing your vocation? Oh, they're huge. Oh, they're gargantuan. This is really important. Your vocation is your path to heaven. This is the way that you get streamlined in grace up to the pearly gates. And I'm not this is the language that the church uses to speak about it. It is your path to heaven. Missing your vocation, that's one thing. Not having your vocation will, I'd say get on it. This is. It's just huge. I find so many of my friends our age, they're just putting off and saying, I want to be more financially stable. I want a few more years of living free, all this stuff. So you won't be living free. Grace is what frees us. Grace is what leads us into the greater relation with God and then with neighbor, which will be heaven, which is what heaven is.
So get married and have triplets on the first try.
Yeah,
no, it's true. And I think you can miss your vocation in the sense of, obviously, we live in a fallen world, and that can happen. Yeah. But never fall into the trap of denying vocation because you missed it, or because the people you love have missed it. This happens a lot, where people want to carve out a vocation out of living a single life. But that itself is a capitulation of the church to the world, right? Because then we imagine that we can possibly be made for something besides a communion with neighbor and God in such a way that serves the common good. Word up. Sound good? I don't know.
Here's an easy one. Shouldn't it be okay to save money beyond your family's needs if it is with the intention of doing some particular magnificent thing?
Shouldn't it be okay to save money beyond your family's needs if it's with the intention of doing some magnificent thing? Yes, absolutely.
Totally.
Yeah, just make sure you actually do the magnificent thing.
Yep.
Don't be lame.
You can even, to keep yourself accountable in it, if you need it, you can put it in a sort of trust where you can't spend it on anything else.
Right.
Or that might be helpful. Or just like start giving it. This is actually something that a family in our parish is doing is, it's weird that I know this, but they're just giving to the priest like what they want him to do with it. So like he's their savings account, as it were. So, and that's actually a helpful. I think that might also work in
or write a contract and sign it in blood that says, I will.
Be careful where you prick.
Yeah.
In light of the universal destination of all goods, is
Nice.
the hobby of collecting a subset of greed?
That's a great question.
If it is stamps versus fancy watches.
In light of the universal destination of all goods, is collecting a subset of greed. Would it differ between stamps and watches? Well, look, the same principle can apply. Does your collecting, is it for others? So I see this a lot, and I can fall prey to it, especially with like vinyl records. But I think there is a vice in collecting something for its own sake, especially insofar as it I can't say that word. It makes an idol out of consumer objects. right? Because it buys into the false scarcity. It's like they only produced 50 of this, and so you have to get it. I have it. It's like, yeah, but they chose to produce 50. They could have produced 60. And then but the point being, yeah, I do think that collecting can obviously be a form of greed, especially when the value of the collection is precisely in the fact that you have it for yourself as opposed to for others. Now, I think that there are some collections that you can take that joy of accumulation, because as we've spoken, it's not that accumulation itself is bad. It's that it's supposed to be an accumulation of treasure in heaven. How do we accumulate treasure in heaven? Well, we accumulate by giving that away. One of the ways we might give away a collection is by making it, if it was like art or something, making it publicly available, giving it to a religious order, having some goal for collecting all this stuff. Stamps, though, I don't know. That doesn't sound bad.
Kind of cute like that.
I don't know. It just seems like there's a just, share them with your kids. Make sure you're not just like hoarding stamps. It's hard to imagine with stamps, right? Because the whole point is that they do get valuable though, right? Because of the collectors.
I suppose that's true.
Yeah.
I just really don't know. That's fun.
I think you just have to check your motivations, right? If you are delighting in your stamp collection because you alone have it and you're considering it as a joy precisely because it produces an individual esteem in yourself without helping the common good, then maybe your stamp collection is not something helping you up to heaven, but something pulling you down.
There's certain things St. Thomas talks about that where they're objectively morally compromised. Fornication is like his kind of go-to example, and then there's other things that are just really depends upon the person and their motivation, and that's why we are trying to tend away from laws and more towards virtues. The laws ultimately, the law of God ultimately derived from the virtues that he set for us in opposite order.
The law is fulfilled in virtue. Be virtuous with your stamp collection. We have no rules for you.
And that
God
one's
bless.
Just, there you go. Thanks.
I'm having a little trouble with this one.
All right.
In the background of this discussion seems to be the extreme credit-based nature of our modern economy. Could you speak to if this has changed with time? Or, asked stated another way, surely there are other more creative ways to support the building of the common good. Maybe focusing on these can help us distance ourselves from money as far as possible.
Okay, lingering in the background of this conversation is the fact that our society is built up on credit. Maybe there's other ways of building up the common good other than that. I would just completely agree. Credit is something that was always something that you had to discern into. It was okay in the Middle Ages, as mentioned, but it's not, it's nothing to build on. Why? Because you're abstracting too much from what is actually happening, the real work being done in the economy. Work needs to be the basis of all economic activity. This is John Paul's great insight is that when was Laborum Excelsis? Anyways,
2003.
Was it?
No.
Okay. I think I was going to say 80s, but where we need to replace credit with work as the basis of our economy. But also, even more than that, we have to realize that at the end of the day, work is the end of the economy. It's just whether or not we in America realize who it is in other countries that are working for us to have the basis of a credit society. Like, why is it that so many people can have debt to spend money that they do not have? Well, it means that somebody is working. And so absolutely the basis of the common good has to be based upon the real, which has to be on work and not credit.
I have nothing
Consider writing a book?
Would you consider writing a book?
Yeah. Thanks.
What are your opinions on credit unions? I'm in a location that currently does not have a Catholic credit union. Would it be wise to begin one?
Yeah, but here's the thing: credit unions, to my dismay, are not really that different from banks when it comes to this particular issue. And maybe some are, and I can be corrected on this. but a credit union more refers to how the thing began, insofar as credit unions began with people within an actual community pooling their resources to give loans. But once that money, and that's good, that is absolutely a great thing to do. And yes, you should build your own credit union. But when you're just talking about like, okay, I want a moral way to do money, I'm going to go turn to a credit union, probably not going to help you, because even if back in 40s, Jimmy Stewart and whoever got their money together and started giving out loans, what's happening now is the exact same thing that's happening at for-profit banks. It's all being invested in, whatever companies, just keeping the American.
Which ends up eroding the community that originally was there.
Right.
And
right.
why?
Which is why when you try to get a loan from a credit union today, it's going to be the exact same process. Largely speaking, besides superficial details, it's going to be the same process as getting one from your bank.
Yeah, and this is another, important point. Something we brought up in the 401k discussion is that, you can, just in the same ways you can have a retirement fund so long as you're okay with the entire world being addicted to their iPhones. You can have, a credit union so long as you're okay with the community that created it disintegrating. Really.
Right. And I called, I think it was Ohio, I called some different Catholic credit unions that had Catholic in the title, and I just wanted to speak with people on it. And I asked, well, what makes you Catholic? And the answer is always the same. Oh, well, we were begun by Catholics in the community. Like the bishop got some of the Catholics together and did that. And I asked them, how does being a Catholic credit union affect like your policies on investment? And they said, oh, don't worry, it doesn't. Using those terms, it doesn't. Don't worry. And so that dismayed me, because I'm a big believer in the names that people give things, which is foolish. No, I am. That's a problem. I think it's just all the name. So like, I remember one time I was in Walmart as a young child, and I was looking around the Walmart, and I had this terrifying realization that it wasn't actually a Walmart. It was just this big building, and everything in it was totally, there was no real relation that made the thing Walmart. And I looked up at the sign that said Walmart, and I felt this profound fear, this kind of like shuddering and trembling came over me, because I was like, well, if Walmarts aren't really Walmart, they're just this social organization that could completely go away or never have been and fail. And honestly, my belief in them is simply the result of a repetition of forms where every Walmart looks the same, so it takes on the appearance of a natural object, right? Like corn or a radish. Every Walmart, kind of grows in the same way. Well, if that's not true, then everything is tenuous and everything is open to being built or destroyed, and all things hang from a thread. And that fear has never really left me. Why are we talking about this?
I have a great image of you holding a teddy bear, binking your mouth, clutching your mom's hand, walking along and looking up at the sign and saying all that.
Yeah, I don't recommend it. I say live in the world of forms, even if they're artificially produced.
Well, we're just
so yeah, sorry about credit unions. But if they're called Catholic credit unions, it usually doesn't mean anything. Yeah. Hate to say it. If you are a Catholic credit union, hi. And if this is not the case, and Catholicism actually influences your policies in terms of investing, etc., then that's awesome. In fact, somebody contacted us that just started a bank.
Super cool.
We should. I wish I knew exactly off the top of my tongue. It was a Catholic worker house.
Yeah.
Simone Veil.
Veil,
Catholic worker house.
Yep.
Somewhere.
Out of Portland?
Maybe.
Oregon?
Maybe. The point is,
they're doing it real.
We're gonna post
We'll post it. Yeah, you'll see it.
But they're doing a Catholic credit union. This was fascinating. That the basis of getting loans is no longer on just the sort of typical process, because they're trying to avoid some of these evils, but it is actually based on a member of the credit union who begins it, backing your loan. So agreeing that if you fail to pay, that you're surety of it, which is an incredible route to take, because then what it means is people are asking for loans, and it's a sort of requirement of the process that they develop a personal relationship.
Yeah.
And that's the way that they get around usury, right? Because then it's not based on interest. That's not the thing that's driving people to give. to give out loans.
Yeah, it's so cool.
So there's probably going to be less loans in a certain respect because people who are applying are actually going to be evaluated in terms of their ability to repay, considered in itself, not considered as some kind of like profit producing.
Right. And as a result, you can only put so much money there,
Right.
Too, as it really has to be based in those relationships of trust.
Anyway, so
we hope
whoever
we're
you
hoping
are,
that happens.
that's super cool.
Yeah.
To what extent is it admissible to save a big amount of money when you live in a country such as Argentina, where there's corruption and inflation increases monthly?
Okay, is it okay
yeah.
to save a lot of money when you live in places like Argentina where inflation shoots your savings account in the heel? I just say find another way of doing it, I suppose. I mean, this is Gold Money is a company that enabled a lot of people in these smaller countries to put their money in precious metals, but I think their fees are just, they're maybe too high for a lot of these folks these days. Yeah, that's really tough. I really don't know. I mean, how often that happens. I was in Egypt. I was living in Egypt when the currency, or right after, I suppose. I moved there right after when the currency literally cut in half.
Mm-hmm.
And the Dominicans I was living with, who held all of their currency in the euros, literally had double the amount of money that they had elsewhere. And
You know what I think about this?
we're just all screwed.
I think get it out of the savings account and get it into some real goods. The man wants you to have all your money in a place where it can be cut in half, reduced. I mean, that's just obvious.
What would you recommend them buy, though?
I mean, I go back to real estate. Like, if you can do it, do it.
Buy an empty lot. That's a good idea.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like if you, and again, this is all within the context of like you have a reason to save for a particular act. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
just talking about saving, you're talking to the wrong guys. Because if that's the only concern, then I'd say, yeah, don't save your money, spend it now on those souls over whom you have care.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are saving for some particular reason, I think that one of the great ways of keeping Christian power suppressed throughout the world is by having Christians integrated to a money economy where all of their labor and all of their work at the end of the day becomes summarized and limited by just cash, right? And then we tend to put it in the bank accounts and then it devalues. So Christian power is translated into money, which is itself already given over to both state and corporation who have their own ends. Okay. So I'm not saying that land is like a panacea. You know, there's ways that can become devalued. In the end, everything's kind of out of our control, but there are some things we can do where we can at least say, let me turn this work that I'm doing into real things that people need right now, rather than trying to always use money as this long-term middleman and therefore leave myself open to thief and moth, as Jesus Christ says. So if you can put it into good works within your community as immediately as possible, then I think you will build up not only things like real estate investments, but goodwill and security in friendships and family through the virtuous use of that money. And then those are things that the moth does not corrode, or at least not as quickly.
Somewhat related to money, Eric asks, what should keep me and my family from moving to Steubenville?
What?
Zero.
The question is what?
Oh, sorry, I keep doing this.
Eric asks, what keeps me and my family from moving to Steubenville?
Nothing. Come on over. Here's the thing.
Yeah, we'll show you.
This is what Steubenville needs. It's got a lot of houses that are in really bad shape. So if you want a good Catholic community, I mean, like obviously with this sort of thing, you can't guarantee that we're going to get along. You might be really annoyed by me. I might be really annoyed by you. So with no guarantees whatsoever about how we all sort of shake down, there's a lot of houses that need to be fixed up. If you're moving from somewhere like the West Coast, chances are you're selling a property that's greatly increased in value over the last 20, 30 years, right? Or whenever you got, over the last 5 or 6 years. Okay. So that means that you're coming out of a land of affluence, and you're moving to the Rust Belt. That's what tends to happen, right? When people move to Steubenville, Ohio. Well, that means that you're coming with what the Rust Belt doesn't have, which is some money in your pocket. One of the things that I think can be frustrating for people looking into places like Steubenville is that a lot of people who are, especially after COVID, are desperate for community, are desperate to get out of big cities, are looking at smaller towns like ours, and in particular Steubenville, and then finding that for actual housing, for houses on the market and for land, it's actually it's become fairly competitive of late. Like if there's a house that's ready to move into, bam, people are snatching it up. I've got friends who've been here for 6 years and are just trying to find a house, and they're just like people are, you get it. But here's the thing. Don't tell anyone. Oh, shoot. There are many, many houses that need the investment to be flipped and then, or not even flipped, but to be fixed and then to be lived in. I mean, I could just list off 30 properties within the radius of where I live, that if you come with $75,000, you can probably pick up the house for about $8,000 and then be, living in it for under $100,000.
Yeah.
When in terms of the actual market around here, if you're going to buy a house on the market, you're probably looking at about $120,000. There's cheaper houses. I mean, and I know that probably for people on the West Coast, that still sounds extremely cheap. It is, right? It's not $400,000, which is I think typical house cost in Seattle area.
Way more.
Oh, really?
I would say, yeah.
So what's to prevent you from moving to Steubenville? Nothing but the sin, the flesh, and the devil. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, do what you want to do.
We'll show you around if you come.
Right, that's true. We will show you around.
I'd love to show you.
As a graduate of Franciscan, my experience there,
Bummer.
including faculty, was a largely pro-capitalist conservative brand of Catholicism.
Oh, boy.
Given your criticism of capitalism, Trumpism, and many other right-wing ideals, I'm wondering how you navigate through this puritanical Catholic.
Okay, what's the name? Is there a name on this?
Meta XY.
Oh,
Meta XY.
I know this is a person I know. Just trying to like.
Okay, so Meta XY. I almost feel bad repeating this, but they ask, because they are a graduate of Franciscan University,
which is the university in our town.
Yeah, it's a mile that way, and they it's less than a mile that way actually.
You have an amazing sense of direction.
And there is a largely pro-capitalist, pro-Trump vibe up there, and that's true. And
I can forgive the Trump stuff. That's fun.
Yeah. At least use a blast. At least you did awesome stuff, like serious fireworks.
Twitter was great. That sucks.
We're not up at the university, I guess.
But I went to Franciscan University. I'm a proud Baron.
He's wearing the green shirt.
That's right, Franciscan's logo, and I did my master's in philosophy there, and I can't say good enough things for the philosophy department there. I worked under the inestimable, brilliant John Crosby, who has utterly just, oh my gosh, he's done great work, and he's brought Catholic phenomenology to new heights. Why are we talking? Oh, but yeah, no, the business department is in dissent from the teachings of the Catholic Church. Yeah. I would never be afraid to say that. And it's not their fault in a certain respect, in that I think most business departments by nature have to kind of preach the party line on this. But
philosophy and theology is not all, there's a substantial percentage of the professors there that don't hold to that. I mean, Mike Cirilla doesn't,
Naming names.
He's a good guy. I'm giving him credit.
Names
Scott Hahn doesn't. Obviously, Andrew Jones, Alex Plato.
These are a lot of names. You're stressing me out. You're stressing me out.
Okay, I'll stop. But those were all, I was just saying, all good things.
No, I'm sorry. I don't mean to generalize so much that it seems like a watery response, a tepid tea, right? That hasn't had enough time to steep. But I will say this: the Catholic Church has got itself all tied up in a defense of capitalism.
Yeah.
And it has been extremely hard to extricate itself from that.
Yeah.
One of the big reasons is because of donors. Capitalists have all the money. So obviously, if you want money, you have to be pro-capitalist, right? It's this self-justifying donor stream.
Yeah.
This explains a lot of Christian colleges, but any institution's sort of adherence to it. It's also become itself a part of conservatism. And this is the socialists' fault. They're such jerks about America, right? That even when they're right about their critique of capitalism, they present it in such a repulsive light that you can't critique capitalism without becoming some kind of like anti-American moron. Like that becomes like the face of anti-capitalism, which is absurd because America isn't even like a capitalist by any kind of essential decree.
No,
it's totally an extrinsic addition to our beautiful country with its rolling hills and lovely sunsets. So I think that people find themselves within this because and the other problem, of course, is the Republican Party, right? Which increasingly this is no longer the case, but the Republican Party had a few things that Catholics really wanted for a little while, right? It had a defense of the unborn, and it had briefly a defense of traditional marriage. That's out the window. No one cares about that anymore. And it had a sort of general sense of, morality about it, right? Which is important for Catholics because we understand that if holiness doesn't begin here, that there's no way it like just magically becomes social, right? No, if you're evil here, you have evil structures of society. That's how it works. Okay, so within the Republican Party platform, though, there was also this sort of libertarian defense of free market capitalism that just became idolatry. And we're seeing right now in America the end of this, right? Because now there are people who are genuinely conservative that they don't care about free markets. They're not there thinking, okay, how do we preserve the rights of the rich to get as rich as possible without any constraints? No, they're asking like, how do we maintain our homes, our families, our country, the ecology of our land from destruction, right? How do we conserve? How do we protect the goods we have? Well, part of that is not allowing just uninhibited accumulation of wealth that's somehow magically going to be turned by the power of greed into like products that are made that benefit anyone. That doesn't happen. It never has. And when people get tied up into this ideology, they just think that they have to they have to eat the whole meal, right? So if we're going to have the pro-life thing, we have to have the pro-capitalist thing. If we're going to have the pro-marriage thing, we're going to have unaccumulated, which leads to absurdities, right? Where you're in one breath saying like, the family is the most important thing, and it's absolutely right that Jeff Bezos has accumulated most of American wealth. Like, well, how can you have these two things? Like, one obviously wars against the other. Like, if familial power isn't actually power, where distributed wealth is actually in the hands of families, as opposed to them just living off a wage, like, if that's not happening, then all your talk about pro-family stuff it's not consistent. It doesn't go all the way. If you're really pro-family, you're pro the distribution of wealth to families.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is this is the broad scheme, and I think Franciscan is an excellent place, but it does fit right into that larger political problem, right? That we've been tied to the Republican Party, we've been unnecessarily tied to capitalism, and the church feels like it has to be this parrot, this mouthpiece. Yeah. For the world. And what's really freeing is that it doesn't. It never has. I mean, it has a social teaching that doesn't need to say things like, oh, just wait a minute, I know greed seems bad, and we often talk about how greed is a sin, but there is a way in which greed can actually be good for the whole society. Like, you don't have to involve yourself in these mental gymnastics. You can say, greed's evil. If you're greedy, you're going to hell. Yeah. Forget what the CEOs of companies think. They're wrong. Unfortunately, many business departments are they've got too much skin in the game to be able to say things like that. Yep. And so they keep preaching the gospel of mammon, and the gospel of Christ suffers.
Can we run out of questions?
Oh, there's more questions. It's getting hot in here.
Yeah.
Have you read The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism by Max Weber, and do you find much distinction between the political financial views of American Catholics and Protestants?
Good question. What do we think about Max Weber's Protestantism and the Spirit of Capitalism? And do we find that there are some major similarities between Catholics and Protestants along these lines?
Catholics are mostly Protestants these days, economically speaking, right? This sort of goes back to what I was just saying.
Yeah.
That practically speaking, like you take a Catholic and you take a Protestant, do I find like a difference in their economic thinking? No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But that's a damn shame.
Yeah, I think the thesis is great, by the way. Okay, to answer the rest of the question. All right, next question.
Should the church invest its wealth or be completely reliant on the charity of its members?
What do you... sorry, I keep doing this. Ask the question and then I'll say my...
Should the church invest its wealth or just be reliant on the charity of its members?
What do you think?
Yeah, we really think that it should.
Yeah, don't
because there's a predicament that we find even here where there's so many beautiful. Okay, let's back up. In Steubenville, we have a lot of beautiful churches. So many beautiful churches that have ginormous endowments and no congregants, where they're not even open on Sunday. Some of them, and that's just.
And this is true across the board of the Rust Belt.
Yeah. And this, it just seems like a joke at a certain point. And if something is going to die, let it die, well. And
you know what I read? Can I tell you a story that I read from John Chrysostom, however you want to say it.
Tell us a story.
I'm not biased. Okay. It's a story that he tells about a lady who died and gave a large endowment, and didn't give it actually because she was dead, but had a bunch of money that was supposed to go to the church. And then there was some debate within the sort of parish about how this should be allocated. So some people said, well, this should be given to the monastics. Some people said this should be given to the parish, essentially. Some people said this should be given to the poor. You know what Johnny said?
What did Johnny say?
Bury it with her.
That's the freaking man.
He's so cool. He's the man.
He is the man.
He said the faithful need to know you don't give anything once you're dead.
That's a great...
So how does this relate to the church? Well, the church right now is not radical. We're terrified. We're terrified of not having money. And because we're terrified of not having money, we keep on doing things that lose parishioners and congregations because we're more concerned about our livelihood than we are the gospel. And so we get involved with the world in adulterous ways. We invest our money in Google. We invest our money in Amazon. We pay for our priests' retirements through the dividends that the world provides. And we never build up, as a counter to those kind of practices, communities that are strong and that take care of each other within the parish, seeing the parish as an actual unit of society. And so we get what we pay for. We get weak and scared priests. We get parishioners that are maybe together for Sunday, but they're not involved in any common work, because the actual power that money does represent, whether we like it or not, is siphoned off to the world out of our fear. So if we actually ended in practice of investments, turned retirement over to lay people who actually wanted to give to their priests and to take care of them in their old age. I'm not saying it's an overnight switch. I get that. This is incrementalism, blah, blah, blah. I'm just saying that you can see, just in imagining that the church would become something powerful and resilient, right? And something worth talking about. And I think we're too scared to do that right now, but I pray for the day when we're not.
I'm having trouble following this one. Here we go.
Okay, got a long one.
Finding that most Catholics don't agree with the church in regards to money and aren't willing to
Yes.
pass the Americanism, capitalism, etc.
Yes.
that imbues our culture.
Yeah.
We are increasingly isolated and unable to form this Catholic culture. How do we attempt to change this trend?
This is just the meta question. To formulate it, Catholics don't buy any of this stuff, largely, that we're preaching here.
Mm-hmm.
They are into Americanism, capitalism, etc. A couple other isms in there. How do we change this?
I think it really goes back to how we've always evangelized, interpersonally, calling people to come to Christ, but first of all by showing that conversion in ourselves.
I mean, you might consider self-flagellation.
We're actually selling whips here at New Polity, and
you want a New Polity branded whip? Yeah, John Paul II did. Did you know this?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, towards the end of his life, this was revealed. I'm just saying, suffering and doing penance for the sins of the church it's real. It is real. It changes things. It changes it for yourself, and it's efficacious for changing the hearts of others. If you would fast and pray, and otherwise give alms, that would be a start. But I don't want to leave it there, because it's, how do we evangelize people on this? Well, I mean, we've said that there needs to be sermons, honestly.
Yeah,
it's been
I think priests really, need to take in that St. John Chrysostom mentality. Don't fear the lack of mammon. Yeah. Fear first the lack of God.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe if you're a priest, don't save the talk on money for the parish campaign.
Yeah, I would not do that.
This is what happens. This happens all the time, right? Where the first time you hear about giving and giving alms is when there's about to be a pitch for the bishop to take most of the money and then dole it out to the Catholic schools or whatever's getting it. Right? It's no, this is something that people need to be habituated now so they can even prudentially give to the parish campaign in the first place. Anyways, I think it does fall on the priests. And we've talked about this before, and Andrew's really opened my mind to this, that preaching is not this silliness that we're involved in right now. Preaching is making the word of God present into the community in which you're speaking, right? It is it's like cooking for people and then serving them the food, right? So if that isn't going to take seriously Christ's teaching on money, which are numerous, various, diverse, interesting, full of mystery to the average hearer, if the preaching doesn't take that into consideration, what will? Nothing, I don't think. Yeah. Because we don't even believe that Christ really changed everything to do with money, that he created a way out. And because we don't believe that, we don't see that in the scriptures anymore. I really genuinely think that we read the scriptures on money and our minds just sort of shut off because we have this pre-developed notion that somehow Christ didn't come to redeem that. Yeah, Christ redeems my soul and maybe even my community, but the dollar bill, that's something else. That's some sort of worldly thing that he was.
Yeah, and I think you find this especially in richer parish communities and stuff, is that priests have completely given up on the sanctity of marriage as well. And so I think that that's really important for young priests to realize, is that if I cave on this, I can't be virtuous and just hold one vice, and I can't be a good preacher and not tell the whole truth. I think that's good, really. And so if you care about marriages, if you care about families, you need to protect, and you're determined to protect marriages and families in your parishes, then you're going to have to also start caring about the economic health of your families. And by that I mean, conforming to the truths of Christ. So
the spiritual power uses its spiritual sword, part of which, the swinging of which is preaching the double-edged sword of the gospel. And the lay people, for their part, need to stop being such wussies and to actually develop businesses and works that operate according to the principles of Catholic social teaching, which have been being preached to us from the office of the papacy up until today. Because once you do that, then you have a sacramental example. And what I mean by that is you have something to show that really instantiates the principle in such a way that it's available and desirable for others. And maybe it's just one little island of Catholic social teaching in a sea of capitalism or welfare socialism or whatever. But the point is that if you don't do that and the priests are preaching but you're not building, then they're going to be preaching to rocks, right? And simultaneously, if we're building what we're building but the priests aren't preaching, then we just become some kind of option within a world. Maybe you could be just, maybe you could be capitalist. You choose. It's America. But if you have the priests saying it is an obligation that all labor tends towards having a share in the profit that it produced. It is a sin to not operate in that manner, right? It is a sin to offer an unjust wage. You will go to hell if you have a savings account that you just accumulate for no other reason than security. If these things don't come, then the work of the laity it'll crumble into so much dust. Is there any happy questions? This is a downward spiral because it's getting
What time is it, by the way?
It's 4:53.
Oh my gosh.
I totally missed my meeting with Josh.
Rats.
Maybe he saw you on and knew that.
Are there
hope
people
so. I'm
still
sorry, Josh,
watching?
if you're
Are there
watching,
people
yeah.
still watching?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
Oh, wow.
Okay. All right. Well, then we have an obligation here. No more questions. Can we say that? Stop asking questions.
Pretty close.
Okay.
Thoughts on using treasury bonds as inflation hedges?
That's cool. Thoughts on using treasury bonds as inflation hedges? I don't know what that means.
It's really interesting. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that question. My first thought is, probably not a bad idea, but I'd have to spend time thinking about that.
I just want to have an inflatable hedge.
We touched on this, so maybe we move on.
Okay.
Please expound on the relationship between Protestantism, capitalism, and individualism.
I think we'll go to the next question.
Protestant capitalism and individualism, all indissolubly linked
I think
by the destruction of the idea of spiritual merit.
So we're
and
not
its-
going to go into that.
We are.
No, we're not going to go into that one. Why? Because Andrew Jones and Alex Plato have an entire episode
we gotta-
dedicated to that
We
question.
got to pitch this.
So
You're right.
we'd really recommend you hold on to that.
Living Catholic lives, sacrificing to keep wife, mom at home, we feel powerless to live the ideals you discuss. Give our children attachment placed by owning land, etc., due to the rigged system.
Yeah.
Advice.
So the first part, was it living with?
Living with
Living
what? Sorry?
Catholic lives, sacrificing to keep wife, mom at home.
Oh, living Catholic lives and
sacrificing to keep wife and mom at home. Is that the? Yeah.
Feeling powerless
Oh,
to live up to the ideals.
Totally.
Yeah, well, I mean, so power in a nutshell, it's the ability to affect one's will. You can affect your will in many ways. Physical force is one of them. My desire to pick up this empty Dr. Pepper zero sugar can, they're very good, by the way, is part of my ability to affect my will. But also you can affect your will in various ways by coercion and control, but most importantly by love. And coercion and control really only happens through love. Like as we've talked about in the past, when my wife asks me to do something, I'll do it because I love her. She has some sort of power over me because of my love. That love can be preyed upon by somebody who who threatens my wife's life and asks me to do something. I'll do it as a result. And that's pretty much how money works. That money is power insofar as it coerces people to do things. So yeah, when you say powerless, I get it. Like that's that's real.
Yeah, and first of all, just thank you for doing the work of keeping. And I don't know your situation, but in keeping your mom at home, I know that's really hard. And I think sometimes when we speak of the Christian vision here, it can lead to this false idea that we're talking about an equal replacement, right? So like the nursing home is replaced with having your family at home, or like the investment is replaced with like the local investment. But actually in every one of those instances, it is a increase in suffering on your part. To take your parents home is to suffer. It is not just this like sort of cultural shift. Like it is to suffer. You're going to suffer a lot. And you either believe that it's in suffering that we become saints, that we develop virtues, that we become holy, that the goods exceed our material comfort and security, or you don't. And when you don't, then it's just a bad hand, right? And then that powerlessness is exactly as the word describes. It's just impotency. It's just inability to do anything but be on the receiving end of a world that's rigged against the poor, and it's obviously for the wealthy. But that is not true. That is not true. When Christ told us that we gain merit in heaven, he wasn't simply like locating some cool place to put our savings accounts. He was freeing us from the idea that we are somehow powerless when we don't have money. That in fact, the most powerful person on earth is one powerful in good works.
Yeah.
And there is no way of taking that truth and saying that it's somehow going to mean that there's like some Christian version of doing capitalism and doing consumerism and doing investment strategies that like leads to the same results. There's not. What Christianity calls us to is the cross, and what it offers is the resurrection. And I really think that it sounds like from this question, I mean, I don't know you from Adam, but it sounds like you're on the cross. And I just want to affirm that you are meriting. You are meriting in a way that no savings and, you know, no increased wage, no bonus will ever give.
Do you believe that someone who is mostly convinced but hesitant to cash out his 401k is engaging in a grave sin?
Do you believe that someone who is mostly convinced but hesitant to cash out their 401k is engaging in a grave sin? Let me get my Jesuit manual. What is it? No, that's an illustrated encyclopedia of the saints. That one. There's probably some Jesuits in there, though.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is, you know, we want to be gentle with you on this one, because this is a paradigm shift. It's hard to convert on these things. I'm not gonna lie though, but I would be worried about you, depending on what you have or where it's sitting in. If it's in these blind investments that you don't know what's in it, yeah, I really, really worry. If it's sitting in a money market and you don't want to take the tax hit, then that's a different matter. Something that I think you're really close. You're almost there. Just, you know, bite the bullet and do it, I would say.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, a grave sin is what? Grave sin is a grave matter, with full intent of the will, and the other thing.
What's the other thing?
Full knowledge.
Oh,
full knowledge.
Okay, full knowledge. Yeah.
Consent of the will, knowledge, and grave matter. So, you know, just go down the list like a good Catholic boy. I mean, this is from Mama Barnes. I would never call her Mama Barnes. I don't know why that came up.
But knowledge. So it's whether it's.
So if you really know it's wrong.
Yeah. But if you're not really convinced, it kind of sounds like you're convinced, but you don't want to be. So then
that's where it would be, I think, a grave sin, because that means you know that it's wrong to have these blind investments, and you know, the grave matter thing, I think, could be the point of debate, right? Like, is this in fact grave versus venial? But when you don't risk that distinction, if you're not clear in it, I guess is what I would say. And then the full consent to the will, I mean, you're consenting, right? Like, if you really can cash out and you really do think that you should, and you're just worried about the consequences, then while your culpability might be mitigated by the nature of those consequences, like if it's really a lot of pain that's facing you upon doing that, then sure. But if it's not, then yeah, I'd say you're risking grave sin. But here's the thing. I don't think that, at least initially, there's a lot of grave consequences, because you're ending up with money.
Yeah, I mean, that's real. I mean, Alex, you want to say something about that? Where, you know, no, you don't want to say anything. He doesn't want to say anything about that. Yeah, if you cash out, you know, you do have the benefits of being able to, you know, you're going to have a smaller number than what is on a computer screen right now, but you're going to have more money in real life to actualize and to replace with a real good.
What happens when people die with a 401k plan? Does it go to their wife or something?
Yeah, it could be inherited.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Just checking. All right, next.
What are your thoughts on working for local government?
What are our thoughts on working for local government?
Wow, excellent. Well, are you?
I think so much about this. No.
Okay.
I think a lot about this. In fact, I think so much that I'd probably pitch most of it to the Politics podcast. See, now I'm doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
But I will say this about that you can be really efficacious on a local level. And I think that a lot of these ideas, because they're so radical, they really require a lot of personal conversations with people and people in charge of institutions. You know, so it's not really something easily imaginable without strong local politics. And I mean even think about something like buying local, which is obviously a foundational principle within everything that we're talking about, which just turns power inwards a little bit so that families, rather than nation states, grow powerful. And it seems like that's something that would be hard to imagine as like state or national policy. Like if the nation told us to buy local, it'd be kind of like, well, whatever. Anyway, sorry, that's just a aside. But yeah, I think local governance is a great place for Catholic radicals to infiltrate.
Yeah. I would recommend seeing Mark's article, 100 Cities by November 2021.
Yeah, we're hoping to get 100 people, like-minded people, into any position, from dog catcher to councilman to mayor, in 100 cities by November, which is coming up.
It's sure coming up. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
But, we really believe in subsidiarity, not just as a good policy, but as just the way that the world works. Is that the strongest power relations really are at the bottom. And they grow less powerful as you move up. And so if we really want a fundamental change in our politics, we're going to start at the bottom. Two more
questions. Best ones for last.
About Andrew Carnegie giving away all his money before he died.
It's
awesome. Why do we think about Carnegie giving away all of his money before he died? We think it's awesome.
He might have bought heaven right at the end. That's what I think. And you know what's funny? I really do think that. Can I say this about Carnegie besides the correct pronunciation of the word?
Sorry.
It's a Pittsburgh situation.
Good move.
Wouldn't it be marvelous if more people were like Carnegie for all of his weirdness, and less like Bezos? I mean, like Carnegie, you can give him every critique that we've given here, right? But what did he do? He got guilty and he started like reading the Gospels, and then he built like thousands of libraries, and we have one in our town today, a library.
It's beautiful, yeah.
Bezos is just
went to
goofing
space.
around in space. All the money. I don't know. One day we'll get some Carnegies.
Last question: is it wrong to pray for one's own economic well-being?
Ooh, what a wonderful question to end on. Is it wrong to pray for one's own economic well-being?
So I before just answering, no, of course not. I do. What do you think the hesitation is for this person?
Well, I think that we're a little bit conscience-stricken in that when we say economic well-being, I think we know we mean more than we need. Because I think for Americans, well-being is associated with a net of security where we no longer rely on others. And I'm not saying that this is this particular person. I'm saying that that's how it's preached, right? Like what does Ramsey mean when he says financial peace? He means that you can buy whatever you want and you don't rely on others.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas what does the Catholic Church teach when it says that all of society should be ordered to peace? It means total reliance on others, and you don't get to buy whatever you want. So, I mean, personally, I think when I hear hesitation in that I think that we know that when we say the words economic well-being, we have to actually dethrone them.
Yeah.
We have to go crush that idol and let it mean what it means.
Right, because I mean, something we've brought up quite a bit is that the economy is based upon the household management, but it was also the first way that church fathers talked about the activity of God, like God Himself, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit interacting with one another. It's also a word that St. Paul uses, oikonomia, in various epistles to talk about God's plan of salvation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, God's plan of salvation is for the whole world, but it's particularly also instantiated in the real in our homes. That our economic stability is for our families, to be able to be in peace, meaning to be active in love, to thwart the anxiety that is the key characteristic of the nations, and rather to be fully in love with God. And to know His love too, to be profoundly aware of it. So So if that is how we're understanding, if we're having a completely revamped, Christianized understanding of what the economy is, as personalized, as active in love, as full of peace and for the family, then please pray for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And to that, I would only add to be prepared for God to answer you with things besides money.
Yep.
Because however we understand economic well-being, it's fairly clear, especially within the Old Testament, that God does not understand it as having a bunch of cash, and certainly doesn't understand it outside of the development of relationships of peace, where his peace becomes manifest because we begin to more properly become communion, images of God, who is communion. And yeah, so just be prepared, because I find that this can go missing, right? When we pray for economic well-being, he might give us a friend, right? And we might be looking for a donation, such as it is. Yeah.
Right. Well, everybody, thanks so much for spending these last.
Any last
31
words?
weeks. I don't really have too many last words. I think we've talked so much, but I guess the last thing that I would say is that we're actively converting in all of this as well.
Sure.
We were thinking about all these things, as we mentioned, for some time, trying to live them out for some time as well, finding peace and joy in them, as we have been trying to instantiate these principles in our lives. But please continue to pray for us as we do, and we take joy in praying for those who've asked for our prayers, and we gladly do so. So, but let's be in union of that in prayer.
Yep.
Last words?
That's
it. Bye.
It's been great. Sorry for not knowing anything but having a podcast, but you can't blame me because everyone does it these days. So, ciao.
Yeah, do tune in to the next series with Alex and Andrew.
I'm pumped. I'm pumped not to talk.
I am, to be honest, very excited about that. But Andrew has just been so transformative in our lives.
Yeah.
I mean, in ways that it's hard to describe. And
yeah, totally.
And I'm sure he will be for you too.
Yeah. All right. Peace.